Episode 661, Fight to the Death. Samuel and the others were in the underpass. There was no light here, and they depended on the leaking light from outside. Samuel didn't speak. He knelt on one knee beside a person lying on the ground, gritted his teeth and cried out, "Old Six!" The person on the ground seemed to hear him, but he didn't close his eyes, and they were still as well. His hands and feet were almost indistinguishable. His abdomen was bloody, and he could only gape. Kneeling beside him, he could only distinguish two words by the shape of his mouth. "Not me." Everyone was holding back their tears, knowing that the two words Six could manage were a natural reaction after being tortured. When he was hit unconscious, these were the only words he remembered. Samuel's throat tightened and his eyes turned red. He said lightly, "Six, it's me, Samuel. Connor has successfully been rescued by us. Your wife just gave birth to a son in the hospital 3 days ago. I gave him the name Michael Long." Six finally seemed to understand his words, and his eyelids finally moved. "Go." As soon as he uttered this word, his hand dropped. His eyes finally closed. Only a faint smile remained on his lips. "Boss, I've already looked. There's only an exit and we'll have to leave before we're discovered." A man walked over from the other side of the underpass. He wiped his face and gradually trailed off after seeing everyone else's reaction to Six. After about 2 seconds, Samuel directly raised his head and looked towards the exit. "Go out first." In order to cover for Connor's departure, Samuel and the others had to expose themselves. Connor was only 16 years old this year, over 10 years younger than Samuel. He had only just entered the industry, so they wouldn't let him fall into a desperate situation no matter what. "I'm going to avenge Six." Someone wiped his eyes and stood up, holding a bag of explosives. Samuel looked up at him. "Go. This is an order." The man raised his chin with a stubborn face. Another man came out, raised his hand and slapped his face. "Why did Six risk his life? He did it for you to die together with him? What's the point of him sacrificing himself?" Samuel directly turned and headed to the exit. Without looking back, he said lightly, "I only know that if I'm dead, no one will take him home." The man who wanted to bring Six away stood there for a moment, then silently carried Six's body. When they approached the exit, the sound of a dog barking could be heard. "It's the wolf that Six's news talked about. It's difficult to deal with. Be careful." The person behind Samuel said solemnly, "Boss, can you deal with your injury? You even went to the supervision room to rescue Connor." Samuel stood in the thick gunpowder smoke, seeing the exit filled with smoke from the smoke bomb that he and the others had just left. There had been a slight explosion, and the air smelled of gunpowder smoke. "I'm fine. We'll split up outside and then meet again at the safe base." The rescue this time had obviously been anticipated by the enemy, so it was better to flee before the entire team was wiped out. The exit was narrow, so they had to lean against the wall to go out. When a man patrolling the area with a wolf saw Samuel, he immediately picked up his communicator.
"At the southern tunnel entrance."
Boom. Samuel dealt with him directly, but the alarm sounded at this time. News of Samuel and the others had been leaked. There were still 12 people left in this patrol team, each with a wolf. "We only have 3 minutes to move. Give Six to me. Hurry up and leave." Under the urgent situation, Samuel knew his ammunition wasn't enough. 3 minutes later, they had to cross the opposite wall, or the enemy team would catch up and their escape would be foiled. Samuel was the most agile amongst them, so he took over Six's corpse. While running to the other side, he dealt with the enemies. The 12 people on the opposite kept falling, but the wolves had been released from their cages and were running straight at them. Samuel's movements were inconvenient because of the corpse, and a large number of the enemy troops were already rushing over behind him. If they were entangled by the wolves, they wouldn't be able to escape. 2 other men had yet to climb over because of an attack from another place. Only when the others climbed up the wall did they discover the blood on Samuel's body. His actions were obviously slower, not only from the wound half a month ago, but also from the gunshot wound he suffered when he saved Connor. Samuel didn't say a word. With 2 wolves rushing forward towards him, he threw Six's body over forcefully and remained composed despite the 2 wolves behind him. "This is my last order. Leave us here and bring Six back." He had promised Six's wife to bring him back. "Boss, 3! Someone climbed halfway and choked out. There were 7 people in total, all scattered. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Samuel threw Six over with both hands, and 3 wolf dogs rushed towards him from behind. Their ammunition was used up, and the 2 other men were still desperately fighting with the wolves. Some closed their eyes and jumped up. Some wiped their tears and rolled over with red eyes. The sky seemed to surge with black clouds, and the surrounding smoke was choking. Everyone's heart sank to the bottom of their chests. Boom! 2 gunshots sounded from the left, and the 2 wolves, whose fangs were about to sink into Samuel's back, were shot down. They fell to the ground from mid-air, creating a cloud of dust. Everyone turned to the sound source. Bang, bang, bang! With the sound of gunshots, the other 2 wolves at the side were also shot down. Samuel raised his head and looked upwards. The woman sitting on the wall just looked ahead and then turned to change directions. Bang, bang! With another 2 gunshots, the 2 headlights on the square behind Samuel and the others were shattered instantly, and the surroundings immediately became dark. By the time everyone else reacted and looked in her direction, Scarlet had already stuck her guns back to her waist. She tilted her head slightly towards Samuel. "Come up." Episode 662. Sharpshooter. Having followed Bessy before, Samuel wasn't particularly surprised by Scarlet's reaction, and he just climbed over the wall. The reinforcements on the opposite side had already arrived. The 2 men below quickly reacted and climbed over after Samuel. Having taken off her windbreaker jacket and her black-rimmed glasses, the contrast in Scarlet was a little big. With the dim light in this area, no one else except Samuel recognized her. "Boss, she must be a sharpshooter in the 1st District." Even some people couldn't help but look at Scarlet. Wasn't she a little too fierce? The 1st District was Michael's main area, where there were several nature-defying people in the special training camp. For example, Sergeant Baldwin, who had excellent fighting skills. Most people in the 1st District wanted to join this team. Samuel didn't answer the question and just solemnly said, "Go first." Standing beside him, Scarlet looked towards Six's corpse. "I heard his child was just born." "Who told you to come?" He glanced at her and grabbed her wrist. "Boss, shall we go to the forest?" Before Scarlet could finish her sentence, several people not far away interrupted her. The danger right now was still far from being relieved. Their decision had been made at the last minute, so there was no car to pick them up. The other party had a car and a helicopter, so their only choice was to escape to the forest. "Let's go." Under such a critical situation, Samuel didn't say much else and just grabbed Scarlet's hand. Scarlet could feel his fingers trembling. She silently followed, clearly seeing how scared he was under the moonlight. Even in the face of life and death, she didn't mirror the same fear on his face. The group of people ran towards the forest. At this moment, Scarlet's mobile phone rang. She took it out with her other hand to see a call from Clarissa. "It's Clarissa," she whispered to Samuel and then picked up. On the other end of the phone, Clarissa's voice was as relaxed as ever.
"There is a car in the forest, and the key is on top. Remember to report to me once you're done."
"Thank you, Clarissa." The chasers behind were already approaching, so Scarlett didn't have time to say much to her. She looked forward and saw the car Clarissa mentioned. It seemed to have been changed and could fit a dozen people. She directly nodded at Samuel. "That's Clarissa's car." Samuel naturally knew who Clarissa was. It seemed like Bessy had still been worried about Scarlett and had notified Clarissa. Thinking of this, he instantly felt relieved, and then immediately told the others to get into the car. After following Samuel for so many years, these brothers also knew him very well. If he told them to get into the car, then this car must be absolutely safe. Samuel took Scarlett to the back seat. Not far from them, car lights were already sweeping the area. As soon as the person sat down in the driver's seat, he exclaimed in surprise, "Boss, this is a modified car. We can get out safely." At least, they could lose those chasing them. Samuel didn't reply. He had passed out almost as soon as he got into the car. "Boss." When the others saw this, their expressions changed drastically. The car lights at the back were turned on, and Scarlett could clearly see Samuel's body. He was bloodied, especially on his right shoulder. The blood left over almost soaked through his entire coat, but he was wearing dark clothes, so it wasn't very obvious. None of them was a doctor, but they were experienced. A higher-up checked his wound and said solemnly, "It's a gunshot wound. The wound isn't shallow. He must seek medical treatment quickly, or it'll be dangerous." Upon hearing this, the others relaxed slightly. With Six's corpse in the car, this battle was considered a narrow escape from death. Everyone couldn't help but turn to Scarlett. A young man glanced at her and spoke first. "Excuse me, are you a friend of Boss? Are you from the district?" "Wait, you..." The lights in the car were strong, and the situation was no longer critical, so everyone took a good look at the sharpshooter girl who had saved them. She was now back to her usual peaceful and quiet appearance, a special kind of temperament unique to herself. Halfway through this sentence, the young man suddenly paused. This person, why did she look so much like Team Leader Rogers? "Team Leader Rogers, it's you?" The higher-up was also taken aback, apparently also recognizing her. "I heard from Connor that you guys were in danger, so I came to take a look." Scarlett glanced at Samuel. "Fortunately, I arrived in time." After thinking about it, she said again, "I'm not from the 1st District." She knew about the 1st District. Scarlett's words confirmed her identity. The pupils of the others also contracted, and even the driver stepped on the brake in surprise. The weak, quiet intern in the morning actually turned out to be a sharpshooter. Furthermore, she was a special double gunner, whom even those in special training camp couldn't be a match for. What is going on? Their communicators had been disturbed to the point where they could no longer be used. After throwing off the enemies, they separated at the intersection. The young man returned to the base to inform Mr. Palmer and the others that Samuel had gone to the hospital. In the base, Mr. Palmer was standing with Old 7, Old 8, and Connor. Easton and the others had been told to pack up their things and had rushed over urgently. "Is the situation very bad? Are Team Leader Rogers and the others all right?" Mr. Palmer turned around and said, "It's not safe here anymore. Old 7, take Connor and the investigators to the base first. Everyone else, come with me." He turned around and drove away with some others. As soon as they left, they met the young man running back to inform the news. Seeing him, Mr. Palmer quickly stepped on the brakes. The others couldn't wait for him to stop the car and directly opened the door to ask agitatedly, "You escaped? What about the others? Are they... They're fine, the young man exhaled before exclaiming. A sharpshooter saved us. All the people rescued are still alive. They're in the hospital. Episode 663. A surprise inside the maximum security prison. Mr. Palmer and the others got out of the car urgently and listened in a daze. Wait, sharpshooter? Did they hear correctly? Hey, which comrade saved you? Mr. Palmer grabbed the young man by the collar and asked anxiously. It was Team Leader Rogers. The young man had already returned to his senses. They originally thought the investigation department irresponsibly sent a few interns over, but from passing the note to them in the car to saving them with 2 guns, he suddenly understood why they had sent her over. He even vividly explained with excitement, as if he had completely turned into a little fan. Mr. Palmer, you guys weren't there, so you don't know how powerful Team Leader Rogers is. She can use a gun in both hands, and she came down from above to save us. She could even hit 100 shots while jumping a wall from 100 meters away. I'm certain that even the sharpshooters in the special training camp can't compare to her. Ambidextrous? The group of people was dumbfounded, and their eyes were wide. They quickly came up one by one and asked further, You're talking about Team Leader Rogers? Mr. Palmer, who was most familiar with her, also knew her identity and resume, but he really didn't know. She was so amazing. In the hospital, Samuel's injury was dealt with urgently. Fortunately, he had arrived in time for treatment, and his physical fitness was already good. He wasn't in critical condition, but he was feverish, so he fell asleep. The others suffered minor injuries, which were quickly dealt with. Scarlett was fine and stayed to look after Samuel in the ward. It had been over 5 years since Scarlett and Samuel met each other in their 3rd year of high school. This was the first time she saw an unconscious Samuel so up close. At first, he seemed a little more frivolous when he wore the strands of dyed hair. Now that he had cut his hair short because of his profession, he looked very tidy. His style was favored by the girls on the internet. A handsome bad boy. Since the heater wasn't turned on in the ward, Scarlett reached out to help him pull up the quilt that had slipped. She looked down at his face, looking at his tall nose and frowning eyebrows as if he was feeling uneasy, even unconscious. She looked down at his hand that was grasping her wrist and was a little dazed. Why? With Samuel's condition, family background, and appearance, what kind of woman couldn't he find? A little lost in thought, Scarlett only stood up and gently removed Samuel's hand when she heard a sound at the door. He had gripped her wrist tightly, so it took a lot of her effort to shake him off. Who are you? A capable and cool-looking woman came in. Her worries turned into vigilance when she saw Scarlett. Scarlett paused for a moment and then politely said, I'm the investigator of this incident. Oh, well, you can go now. You're no longer needed here. The woman retracted her sharp gaze and turned to the hospital bed. Just when Scarlett went out, she happened to bump into Mr. Palmer and the others. Team Leader Rogers, they said that you were the one who saved them. Mr. Palmer had even received Samuel's order to follow and protect her for a period of time, so he understood her temper well. She had a very good temper and personality, so he wasn't apprehensive around her. Scarlett turned her head and smiled quietly. So, you can shoot with both of your hands. Your shooting skills are amazing. Have you really never been in the special training camp? Mr. Palmer asked excitedly. The others also looked at her with scorching, curious eyes. Boys, especially those in this occupation, admired those with good shooting skills. Scarlett thought for a while and said, I haven't been to the special training camp, but someone has taught me. She shoots even better than me. Impossible. The person who had witnessed the scene was in disbelief. Who else could shoot better than you? Those in the first district aren't even as good as you. Mr. Palmer, right? Someone cued him. However, Mr. Palmer didn't respond. Scarlett pursed her lips and smiled. I've something else to do, so I'll leave first. You guys have a good rest. She was going to find Clarissa as promised. The others originally wanted to send her off, telling her that it wasn't safe outside. But thinking of how she was a better shooter than them, they remained silent. They were mainly too embarrassed. After she left, these people continued to look at Mr. Palmer. Why didn't you talk just now? No, maybe there really is a better shooter than her. Mr. Palmer paused and thought of the person who had been noticed by the 1st District's headquarters in the military training. They had even wanted to snatch her from Northwestern University. When Scarlett went downstairs, Clarissa's car was already waiting. Miss Rogers, please get in. As the car drove further, it passed a long winding road. After about 2 hours of the incident, it was already 8 a.m. before they reached the destination. I can't go in. Please wait for 5 minutes. Clarissa is probably coming out now. The driver told her respectfully and then drove off. Scarlett nodded slightly and glanced at the door. It was black and made of an unknown material, with the words "Maximum Security" written on it. The building itself wasn't high, and she could see the top floor. She waited for less than a minute before another car stopped. This time, 2 men whom she didn't recognize got out of the car. When they noticed her and saw that she was also American, they immediately stepped forward and asked, "Is this the maximum security prison?" Looking up, Scarlett subconsciously reached out to push her glasses, but remembering how she had thrown her glasses away yesterday, she put her hand down again. Sorry, I just came here, so I don't know. The man was about to ask something else. At this moment, the door opened and Clarissa came out. While talking on the phone, she glanced outside and waved to Scarlett. Scarlett, come in. Clarissa. Scarlett walked over obediently. The 2 men beside her also glanced at the source of the voice and saw Clarissa's face at a glance. Clarissa? Why are you here? The tall man's voice was shocked and almost broken. At the sound of her name, Clarissa looked over while talking to Bessy. The man was a friend of her ex-husband, Lewis, who had come to find Sherry. Episode 664. Questions from the Depths of the Soul. Clarissa wasn't familiar with Lewis's friends, since he had never introduced her to them, and she wasn't interested in them either. Just like how Lewis didn't know which university Clarissa once attended, Clarissa also didn't know what his friends did. Compared to Lewis, Clarissa was more knowledgeable about Gloria's friends. She nodded slightly at the other party, perhaps just a little more friendly than towards a stranger. After taking Scarlett inside, she continued talking on the phone with Bessy. Yes, I saw her. Wait a minute, I'll bring her in first. Her identity was originally open and transparent, without needing to hide it. The 2 entered, and the enormous iron door was closed again. Lewis's friends stood outside the door, frozen for a long moment before they exchanged glances. The taller man slowly said, Was that Lewis's ex-wife just now? He was in disbelief. The other man paused for a second and then slowly nodded. There were often almost no secrets in the circle, and everyone knew about the grand wedding. Lewis's friends were in complete disbelief. After all, they had never imagined Clarissa would be so powerful. They paused for a while, then walked to the left of the door and asked the guard how they could visit the prison. Maximum security prisons didn't belong to any country and were jointly established by dozens of countries. The prisoners weren't average criminals, so it wasn't easy to visit them. These 2 people were former admirers of Sherry, who had heard about this place after much difficulty. The old guard was reading a carton with squinted eyes. He paused for a long while before slowly saying, It won't work without our boss's handwritten commands. Who is your boss? The 2 people had naturally researched the maximum security prison and knew that their system differed from America's. The one wearing a beige windbreaker and a floral skirt just now." The old man took a puff of the dry cigarette and knocked on his pipe. "If there's nothing else, don't block my light." The two men stepped aside subconsciously and stood on the side of the road. They had both clearly heard the man. The person wearing a floral skirt and a beige windbreaker. Wasn't it Clarissa? The taller man stared at the gate for a long time before he took out his cell phone and sent a text message to Lewis. "I just saw your ex-wife at the maximum security prison. How did you marry her last time?" The entire maximum security prison building wasn't very high. Clarissa had a separate lounge where she took Scarlett over to chat. "Drink a glass of milk first." After inviting Scarlett to sit on the sofa, she handed her a glass of milk, then turned around and took another glass of water. "I know what happened to Samuel. The support team will arrive in the afternoon. It should be no problem." Scarlett held the glass of milk and drank it slowly, her eyelashes drooping and covering her dark and beautiful eyes. "Clarissa, can I go back to America with you?" After a long while, she turned towards Clarissa. "I've already verified the investigator work here. I only have to hand the last procedures to my team's deputy." Clarissa glanced at her in surprise but didn't refuse. She finished her glass of water and tapped on the glass without asking further. "I still have a few matters to attend to and will only leave tomorrow after finishing them. You can take a shower first and rest." At the same time, Samuel, who had slept all night, finally woke up in the hospital on the border. When he didn't see the person he wanted to see, he sat up immediately and scanned the entire room. Seeing the woman, he pressed his temple and asked, "Where is she? Who?" The woman put down the apple in her hand and asked. Frowning, the light in Samuel's eyes dimmed and he laid back down again. "Why is it you? Who else could it be?" The woman glanced at him. Mr. Palmer, who had just come in from outside, naturally knew who Samuel was talking about. He quickly put down a glass of water and said, "Team Leader Rogers took care of you last night before going back. The reinforcements have arrived and Team Leader Rogers is all right too." Upon hearing this, Samuel's prickly face finally eased. As for Scarlett, she returned to America with Clarissa the next day. After returning to America, she began sorting out the border cases, reporting them to the headquarters and then recording the details of everyone in the database. She was so busy that only after a week later when Easton returned, she found out Samuel had returned as well. "Another first-class merit." Gerald couldn't help but pat her head. He wanted to say something else, but thought otherwise in the end. "Come home for dinner tonight." Scarlett's first-class merit had been obtained from the loss of 3 family members and her personal losses. This was her second first-class merit. Compared to the last time, she had obviously grown a lot this time and only had a casualty rate of 1. "No, I haven't finished writing the details of the file." Scarlett shook her head and refused. Looking at her, Gerald suddenly thought of something. He fell silent and let her leave. Once she left, he glanced out of the window at the cloudy sky. Sighing deeply, he continued pondering about Scarlett's promotion. Although she was young and hadn't been in the investigation department for long, her first-class merit was well-deserved. Few people in the investigation department achieved such merits, but Scarlett had jumped 3 levels from an intern to a team leader. Now, just a month later, she was going to be promoted again. Even Gerald felt it was a little exaggerated, so he put it aside for now. He would let Scarlett calm down for a while, since it wasn't good to show off her abilities too much. It was drizzling lightly outside, but she didn't have an umbrella. Walking slowly, she saw the tramp still standing at the intersection, holding an umbrella a kind person had left him. Scarlett was busy looking at him and naturally didn't see a car driving past. The person in the driver's seat slowed down, but he leaned down to pick something up and accidentally ran into Scarlett in a blind spot. Aware that he was in a serious accident, the driver stepped on the brakes and rushed without an umbrella to hold Scarlett up. "Miss, are you all right? Let me take you to the hospital." Scarlett's arm was numb from falling on the ground, and her clean professional uniform was also dirtied. "I'm okay." She smiled apologetically at the driver, her eyes clean and beautiful. "I was in a trance just now. There's no need to go to the hospital." But the driver was about to say something, but he was in too much of a rush. In the end, he apologized again to her and left hurriedly after leaving a business card. Scarlett pressed her arm where the wound had appeared. She would have to go back and examine the redness and swelling. After she left, the tramp opposite her stared at her back. Thinking about it, he took out a very old-fashioned cell phone, whose lock screen page was a photo of a family of 4. He clicked on the address book and sent a message to one of the numbers. Scarlett walked to the bus stop sign, but because she was a little dirty, she didn't sit down and just stood aside to wait. After less than 2 minutes, a Porsche Cayenne suddenly stopped beside her. Stunned, she watched as the door opened and Samuel got out of the car to stride towards her. "Where did you get hurt?" Seeing that the piece of clothing on her arm was torn, he was about to reach out when he thought of something and suddenly put down his hand in a daze. Looking up, Scarlett stared at him and listened to his anxious tone. The arm that hadn't hurt much just now suddenly started to throb painfully, and even her eyes turned a little wet with tears. "Hey, don't cry. What happened?" Samuel couldn't help but chide softly, always maintaining his composure in front of her. "Nothing." Scarlett wiped her eyes. "My arm just hurts." "Did you bump against something?" Samuel examined her arm. "Get in the car first. Let me take a look." Once the black Cayenne drove away, those waiting for the bus who didn't dare to say anything couldn't help but stare at it. In the back seat of the car, the chauffeur drove while Samuel took out a spare medicine box. "Let me see your injury." He carefully rolled up Scarlett's sleeves, only to find that a piece of her skin was rubbed open. It was a little bruised and slightly swollen, which looked very dazzling against the contrast of her white and slender arms. Samuel originally specialized in medicine and was very experienced. He didn't see any fractures and carefully applied ointment to her minor injuries. Then, he looked up at her, whose mood had already stabilized. This was the second time he had seen her cry. On the way, the two didn't speak any further. When the car stopped, Scarlett realized that this was Bessy's house. There were many people here today, including Mary and Jared, all of whom Scarlett recognized. She went in and changed into Bessy's clothes. Sitting on the sofa alone, Aiden saw Scarlett come down and stretched out his arms for a hug. His eyes flashed and dazzled like that of a doll. He was almost 3 months old now and seemed to have his own thoughts. He didn't like being hugged anymore, and he much preferred sitting alone and thinking deeply. Other than Bessy and Michael, it was difficult for anyone else to hug him, but Scarlett was an exception. After all, she was the only woman who could make his mom compromise. After eating, Samuel was called up by Michael for questioning, and Scarlett returned to her dormitory. Patrick sent her back. Bessy didn't stop her either. On the way back, she received Jared's drunken routine call. "Scarlett, are you interested in—" "Yes," Scarlett replied this time without even thinking about it. She had wanted to be an investigator because of Scarlett's dream and for the inheritance. But after the border incident, she really understood the position and developed an interest in 129. Jared could barely believe it. Putting down his fork, he drank the glass of wine in his hand, put it on the table with a pop, and looked up directly. "Wait, I'll go over there now. You'll report to me on the dark street." Before Scarlett could say anything, he hung up. 20 minutes later, a car stopped at the intersection. Scarlett walked to the door of the dormitory and saw Lily waiting at the door. "Mrs. Grant," she politely greeted her. Scarlett seemed extremely calm, as if she was greeting an ordinary passerby. Lily was carrying a bag, which contained a necklace from a luxury jewelry brand. She handed the bag to Scarlett and said, "Your uncle said during dinner tonight that today is your birthday. This is my present for you." She wanted to thank her for doing as she promised and not entangling with Jacob anymore. "No, I don't celebrate my birthday." Scarlett turned around distantly. She was about to leave when a harsh brake sounded, and a black car stopped not too far away. The back seat's window lowered, revealing Jared's face. "Scarlett, hurry up and follow me to report." Episode 665, Racing King. Jared had drunk at night and didn't drive. so a chauffeur had driven him over. He lowered the car window and told Scarlett to come in. Scarlett didn't expect Jared to arrive so soon, and she was stunned for a moment before she reacted. "Mr. Covington." "Get in the car first." Jared directly opened the door of the back seat and gestured her in. He was afraid that Scarlett would reject him again after another night. Scarlett followed him into the car, caught between laughter and tears. By the time they left, Lily was still standing there, staring at the car with slightly furrowed brows. She didn't know Jared, and the car that he had driven over today was quite low-key and didn't have any special features. Aside from the fact that Jared had a slightly unique aura than the people she knew, nothing else really caught her attention. However, one word had caught her curiosity. Report? She thought about it again, counting the years. Scarlett was probably graduating this year, so maybe she was going to work? Ever since Scarlett walked away from the Grant family, Lily naturally didn't pay her much attention. She didn't know how her life was at Northwestern University, much less that she was currently working at the investigation department. As for Gerald, in order to avoid nepotism, he and his family never talked about work, including Scarlett. But Scarlett had gotten into the car with a strange man at night, in order to report something. Standing there, Lily pondered for a while and only returned home when the car disappeared from view. Back home, she went to see her husband. "What is it?" Gerald asked while holding his phone. "Nothing much." Lily went to the bathroom to remove her makeup and put on a facial mask. She wanted to tell him about Scarlett's incident this evening, but she was afraid that he would make use of his connections for Scarlett's work, so she remained silent. Gerald never told them anything about the investigation department, but Lily wasn't completely ignorant. Whenever she met up with her friends to do facials, they would discuss these matters, so she knew the investigation department had changed drastically recently. Outside, Gerald didn't think much and just went out. He put his phone to his ear and continued talking. "I know."
"If you know, why are you still going into the muddy waters?"
It was Section Chief Soup on the other end. Gerald raised his head and said solemnly, "This is a prolonged battle. We must fight it, no matter what the cost is." At the mention of this, Section Chief Soup gritted his teeth.
"Fine, I'll come with you."
On the other side, Scarlett had reached 129. After talking her through the procedures and adding her name to 129, Jared turned to Scarlett with a grin. 129 doesn't have any hard and fast rules. Look at Bessy, she didn't receive any order last month, but she has always been busy dealing with those old men all day long. From now on, Slag Dragon and I will slowly bring you along. As for Clarissa, she was busy with the heavy-duty prison these days, and she also liked to run around outside. Thus, only he and Slag Dragon would have time to bring Scarlett. Scarlett now had her own ID and authority at 129. From this day on, apart from being busy with the investigation department, she gradually started to come into contact with 129. Jared was very busy as the director, so it was naturally Slag Dragon who brought her along. It was the first time Slag Dragon met someone who didn't think he was too long-winded, so he took great care of her. It took about 2 months for Scarlett to get a rough idea of 129's business core and main content. For the other things, she just had to work harder and accumulate more experience. Slag Dragon wasn't selfish at all and handed almost everything that he could offer to her. In the past 2 months, Scarlett was so busy that she didn't even have time to sleep. Occasionally, she would wake up in the middle of the night and stare at the ceiling in a daze. When she heard the name Samuel again, it was at the end of June, when she and Easton made an unannounced visit to a neighboring city. After the case abroad, Easton had become friends with Mr. Palmer and the others. They had even visited Six's family members. Mr. Palmer said that the Bright family is urging our leader's marriage. They seem quite satisfied with the previous military flower that chased him. Last time, I secretly heard Mr. Palmer calling him Samuel. Easton didn't know about Samuel's family background. He only knew that his last name was Bright and that his background wasn't small. While talking, he realized that Scarlett knew Samuel, so he turned to ask her. Taking the car key and opening the door, Scarlett said in a low voice, "I'm not sure. Get in." The car was given to her by Bessy, a very ordinary black Volkswagen. "Oh." Easton nodded and followed her into the car. They were at the top of the mountain and had to drive a long, winding road down. Just after a bend, 3 frail figures came out from the jungle on the mountain. When the 3 people saw the car, they waved frantically. All 3 of them were men, and they seemed to have encountered some trouble. Scarlett recognized 2 of them. One of them was Jacob, and the other was Thomas. She also vaguely remembered the other man, Jacob's childhood friend. In the past few years, Scarlett had changed drastically, especially after entering the investigation department in 129. Other than Jacob, Thomas and Jacob's close childhood friend didn't recognize her. Jacob only stared at Scarlett silently. Seeing how well-dressed they were, Easton didn't think that they were bad guys, so he asked them calmly about what had happened. About 10 minutes later, there was a sudden deafening engine sound from behind. Sitting in the passenger's seat, Easton was taken aback. "Are they crazy? Why are they driving so fast here?" The 3 people behind didn't look so good. "They still caught up to us." Jacob retracted his gaze and turned to look at the looming car behind. "Unlock the door. I'll jump out. They're here to catch me." "No way." Jacob's close friend shook his head and squeezed to the front. "Miss, I'm sorry, but can you move aside? I've been in the club. Let me drive." As he spoke, the car got closer and closer. They could see the rear car window lowering and a black muzzle sticking out. Glancing at the rearview mirror and hearing Jacob's close friend, Scarlett remained silent and just stepped on the accelerator. In front of them was a curve. "Team leader, are you seeking death?" Staring at the cliff in front of him, Easton squeezed his eyes in shock and tightened his grip on the seatbelt. Scarlett glanced at the curve and said, "Hold tight." Slag Dragon was a drag racing king. Episode 666. Here is Bessy's number. Scarlett spoke very few words and respected Slag Dragon very much. Whenever he spoke, she always listened carefully. The frustration that Slag Dragon felt with Bessy and Jared was compensated for with Scarlett, so he had emptied his pockets to teach her. Although Scarlett had only learned 1/10 of his racing, it was more than enough here. Facing the big curve in front, Scarlett spun the wheels to concentrate the weight of the car onto the left wheel. Not only did she not slow down, but she also reached a speed of over 90 miles per hour. Seeing that the car was about to hit the guardrail in front, at this speed, there was an 80% chance of the car breaking through the guardrail. They would crash and die. "Shit, slow down! Change lanes, do you want to die?" Jacob's childhood friend's expression changed. Seeing that Scarlett didn't slow down, he quickly reached out and tried to grab the steering wheel. Scarlett kept her eyes fixated on the road ahead, her hands gripping tightly onto the steering wheel. The car's overall center of gravity was placed on the left tire, the accelerator, gear shift, and handbrake. In the next second, the car would crash through the guardrail, but at that moment, the car did a 180-degree drift. The 2 tires on the left bore the weight of the entire car, and the tire on the right almost touched the guardrail. Screech! With the sound of the tires rubbing friction against the ground, the car went straight through the curve. The person who was about to catch up was immediately left behind. Scarlett stabilized her glasses and continued driving at high speed. Not to mention the others, even Easton was completely surprised by her operation. His mouth hung open and he stared at her. You... He clearly remembered that 2 months ago, Scarlett hadn't even dared to overtake another car. She had always been tepid. Since when had she become so fierce? "Beauty, you're amazing." Jacob's childhood friend also sat back down and looked at her in surprise with shining eyes. "You're a professional racer? Judging from the sound of your car's engine and the grip of the tires, this car has definitely been altered before." Indeed, the car had been altered by Slagdragon. Scarlett didn't know exactly what, since she didn't do much research on cars. She had only learned to drive from Slagdragon for her future work. She remembered Jacob's childhood friend. He had been there when the others were smoking cigarettes, and he had grown up with Victoria. Scarlett remained silent. Jacob's childhood friend didn't feel awkward and continued talking to her. Easton's social skills and observation skills weren't weak. After working with Scarlett for so many months, he naturally knew that she wasn't just gentle in appearance. Her personality was too, and she was very polite to others. At this time, Easton noticed her ignoring the 3 people and immediately realized that something was wrong. He leaned over and said something to Jacob's childhood friend. However, Jacob's childhood friend had been in the market for many years and naturally didn't care about his advice. 10 minutes later, when they got off the winding mountain road, Scarlett stopped the car at the intersection. She slammed her foot on the brakes and unlocked the door of the back seat. Her meaning was very obvious. "Beauty, shall we exchange Twitter information? My name is Kyle Richardson. This is my contact information. For the curve drift just now, your tires must have been worn out. I'll pay you 10 times for the loss." Kyle wanted to add her on Twitter. Scarlett didn't look at him, so he left a business card for her instead. "This is my phone number. Beauty, if you have any problem in Evanston next time, just look for us. Even if I can't do it, our Jacob definitely can." Before he finished speaking, Scarlett forcibly raised the window and drove away. "This Beauty has some character." Kyle stared at the back of the car in surprise, touching his chin. He suddenly remembered the serious business and turned to Jacob solemnly. "Who were those people just now?" Jacob walked forward. "Something to do with my dad. Let's go back first." He had already called the chauffeur in the car just now. Thomas was left behind at the back, staring at Scarlett's car in a daze. He had the best relationship with Jacob, and because of Bessy's relationship with Scarlett, he had even taken care of her before when Jacob brought her along for some occasions. In the beginning, he hadn't recognized her in the car, but later on, he had figured it out. It was just that Scarlett's temperament had changed significantly. The gloominess in her that he remembered from high school was no longer there, so he had taken a while to recognize her. "You two haven't reconciled yet?" Thomas followed Jacob and asked. Most of the people around Jacob supported him and Victoria. This was because they had all grown up together, especially Kyle, Jacob, and Victoria. These people had lived together in a big court when they were young. Only Thomas, perhaps because of Bessy, was more inclined towards Scarlett. Upon hearing this, Jacob remained silent. He lowered his eyes and walked forward. His whole mind was still full of Scarlett, and from time to time, he would sigh deeply and clench his hands. He also knew that there was still a particularly big problem between them. What he couldn't understand most was that Scarlett had left him because of unrelated people, and she didn't even bother to listen to his explanations. Kyle had said more than once in the past 2 years that Scarlett was being very unreasonable. Indeed, for people in their world, Scarlett had acted very unreasonably back then. Besides Kyle, many others felt like Scarlett had called the police because of Victoria. The 3 of them returned to Evanston on the same day, but they didn't contact Gerald. The chauffeur drove them back directly. On the way, Kyle answered a phone call and glanced at Jacob. "Jacob, Victoria is having a performance tonight. Let's go." "You can go yourself. I already broke up with her in high school." Jacob replied absent-mindedly. "Jacob, you can't say that. No matter what, we all grew up together. Victoria didn't even haggle with you over your girlfriend's trouble last time. Can't you at least show her some face?" Kyle persuaded with a smile. He had grown up with Victoria, after all, and was biased towards her. Jacob remained silent and told the chauffeur to drive the car back. Lily had just returned from the beauty salon at this time. She was a little surprised to see the three of them, and she quickly told the servants to entertain Kyle and Thomas. The three of them tacitly didn't mention the sudden attack to her, lest she worry. By the way, Lily also thought of Victoria's performance and handed them 3 tickets. You 3 must come to Victoria's first stage. Thomas just accepted the ticket politely. Glancing at his stepmother, it wasn't very hard to understand. He guessed that she still didn't know that Scarlett was related to Bessy. In fact, Lily was somewhat similar to his previous stepmother. If she knew Scarlett's relationship with Bessy, she definitely wouldn't have this attitude. Ever since the previous bar incident, Thomas hadn't seen Scarlett again. He didn't want to get involved in other people's relationships and hadn't paid much attention to it. Later on, the Smith family had been put in a precarious situation, so he hadn't had the time either. Now that the Smith family had stabilized, he finally met Scarlett again. He looked at Jacob and couldn't help but sigh. His brother had probably fallen head over heels for Scarlett. The group of them were sitting down when the landline rang down the hall. Ma'am, it's for you. Lily answered the phone and smiled. Oh, Mr. Soup, Gerald isn't home. Yes, he's on a business trip and hasn't returned in 5 days. Gerald hated being disturbed by others while on a case, and he never called back. Upon hearing this, Section Chief Soup paused for a moment and then said hoarsely,
Mrs. Grant, Gerald isn't on a business trip. You must find a way to find him.
The smile on Lily's face quivered. Mr. Soup, are you kidding?
Mrs. Grant, is your son there? I want to speak to him.
Section Chief Soup asked her to hand the phone to Jacob. When Jacob took the phone, Lily sat down on the sofa with a pale face. Before long, Section Chief Soup rushed to the Grant family's house with a briefcase. I should have prevented Gerald from being so impulsive. This time, it wasn't handled well. He said solemnly,
His guarantee is about to expire, but he still can't find his person. He won't be able to return within the deadline.
What can we do? Section Chief Soup, you have many connections. You must find him. I'll kneel for you. Lily was about to kneel down. Section Chief Soup hurriedly stopped her.
Mrs. Grant, I'll try my best, but I'm not necessarily useful this time. I've already contacted Investigator Hale. Don't worry, I'll try my very best.
He didn't sound very certain at all, and a chill ran through Lily's heart. Thomas and Kyle exchanged glances. The two of them had good relationships with the Grant family, so they were kept in the loop as well. After Section Chief Soup left, Kyle frowned. I'll go back and ask my dad if he has any connections, but if the Grant family can't find the person, then I'm afraid we'll be useless too. Who is this person who even dares to move the Grant family? Indeed, the Grant family was now different from before. If even Gerald couldn't solve it, then the others were helpless too. This was why Lily's heart ran cold. Thomas touched his phone and remained silent. He looked down at the contacts list on his phone and clicked on a number. It was Bessy's cell phone number in Chicago. Episode 667. The results put him in a trance. Grace didn't know that even though Bessy had blocked her number, she had never blocked Thomas's number. During Evanston's turbulence, the Smith family had fallen apart, and only Thomas's personal business had remained intact. This was because Bessy had reminded him of the upcoming wave. It had been very cryptic, but Thomas naturally figured it out. Because of her help, his and Jacob's company had avoided disaster. Thomas had pondered about it for a long time before finally figuring it out. She had helped him probably because of 2 reasons. Because he cooperated with Jacob, and because he had helped her before. Kyle watched Thomas silently hold his phone and whispered to him, Hey, Uncle Grant and the others will be fine, right? In the eyes of Kyle and the others, the Grant family was a colossus that no one could shake. After all, Gerald's resume and position were telling, and he also had many cases in his hands. Although they didn't know Gerald privately, they had witnessed his smooth sail in the circle in the past 2 years.
I don't know.
Thomas put his cell phone back into his pocket. He hadn't seen Bessy for several years. Of course, he didn't know the relationship between Gerald and Bessy, much less with Scarlett. He had understood a long time ago that he was tens of thousands of miles away from Bessy's circle of friends. Although he wasn't sure what was going on with Gerald, he didn't dare to ask Bessy. He could only sigh. In the neighboring city, Scarlett took Easton back to the hotel. They were on a business trip here and had to wait until the case was followed up before they could leave. Easton originally wanted to ask her about the 3 people just now, but when he noticed how silent she was, he didn't ask further. He returned to his room with the room card silently. He stayed on the 6th floor while Scarlett stayed on the 7th. The corridors of the entire hotel were carpeted, and the lights weren't brightly lit. There was no noise around, so it was quiet. Scarlett's room number was 711. She took the room card from her pocket and looked up to see someone leaning on the door of room 711. Holding his phone in one hand and his other hand stuck in his pocket. Samuel looked up at her unexpectedly. "The one providing support for me is you?" Scarlett paused, then walked over with a calm expression. She raised her hand and swiped the room card. The doorway was narrow, and she could feel the oppressive breath hovering over her head, lingering there.
"Sorry, I didn't know it was you."
Samuel was silent for a moment. He reached out and held the door open for her. Scarlett was about to ask how his injury was, but didn't expect him to speak at the same time. Samuel looked a little tired.
"Go on."
Scarlett was still in a state of confusion and didn't ask further. "This is the information I compiled today." She handed him the notebook in her hand. While they were talking, someone rang the doorbell outside. The sound insulation wasn't very good, so Easton's voice could be heard from the outside.
"By the way, team leader, I suddenly remembered,"
Easton said excitedly, not noticing Samuel.
"The person who picked you up today, wasn't it Investigator Grant's son? I've seen him before on the cover of the financial newspaper. He's Jacob, right? He was my previous supervisor. I was wondering why they were so familiar."
Easton trailed off and was stunned to see Samuel.
"Leader Bright? I came to get the information."
Samuel looked away and politely nodded towards him. He was tall and almost blocked the light source in the room. He only stayed less than 2 minutes before leaving. Staring at Samuel's back, Easton couldn't help but rub his chin.
"The Bright family must be rich."
Easton was from a good family and could naturally tell Samuel's wealth from his clothing. Without speaking, Scarlett only reacted when the phone in her back pocket rang. She picked up a call from the investigation department. "You want me to temporarily replace the deputy?" She was shocked to receive such an order. What happened? This matter was still confidential, so Scarlett had no way of finding out. She frowned inevitably and dialed a call to Gerald, but he didn't pick up. With her extremely keen 6th sense, she straightforwardly instructed, "We'll finish handling things over tonight, then we'll directly return to Evanston." The next day, on Saturday, there was still no news from Gerald all night. Both Jacob and Lily stayed up all night, and none of them went to see the concert that they had promised to see. When Thomas and Kyle came, Jacob was about to go to the investigation department to find Section Chief Soup.
"Let me drive."
Thomas noticed Jacob's unbearable fatigue. Jacob didn't reject, so Thomas drove directly to the investigation department. On the way, Kyle was less talkative than usual and silently sat in the co-pilot's seat. After half an hour, the car stopped at the gates. As soon as they arrived at the entrance, they were stopped by the security guards. At the same time, a black car was also stopped. Only those from the investigation department could enter. One person got out of the passenger seat. Only a few meters away, Kyle could clearly see the person's side profile. He exclaimed directly, "Hey, isn't that the girl from yesterday? She's working at the headquarters of the investigation department at such a young age." Thomas also glanced over. He directly picked up his phone, opened the official website of the investigation department, and searched Scarlett Rogers. The displayed content made him feel a little dumbfounded. Section Chief of Disciplinary Investigation Department. Level 2. Scarlett Rogers. Episode 668. Formal Confrontation.
Why aren't you speaking?
Kyle didn't recognize Scarlett and only raised an eyebrow at Thomas, who didn't seem very surprised. Thomas put away his phone and glanced at Jacob in the back seat. Jacob appeared extremely calm. He opened the door and got out with lowered eyes.
I'll go find Section Chief Soup.
Silently, Thomas put away his phone. Since Scarlett had been in the same grade as Bessy previously, she should only graduate now under normal circumstances. He didn't expect that she had entered the headquarters of the investigation department at such a young age and even had such a position. Scarlett didn't notice Jacob and the others and went directly to find Section Chief Soup.
Investigator Grant already sent you out. I didn't expect to find out in the end.
Section Chief Soup glanced at her and shook his head.
This is a game between the older generations. You know Fulton, right? When their section chief was transferred to the investigation department, the alien meteorite case happened that year. Fulton is bent on using the meteorite resources. We can't control them, but they can use this to move Investigator Grant. The investigation department is going to have major changes. Investigator Grant is investigating the resource agreement they signed previously.
Gerald's foundation in Evanston was still considered weak. Although he was on good terms with the Miller family couldn't put a foot in everything. The case between Scarlett and Clarissa last time had taken place at the maximum security prison, so Michael had intervened. But this time, they really couldn't intervene in matters directly related to the investigation department. Too many higher-ups were waiting to backstab them, and Gerald had made a preemptive strike by sending Scarlett away. "Okay, give me Investigator Grant's information first." Scarlett nodded, expressing her understanding. She carried a large document file and went to her office. Walking on the 18th floor, everyone else looked at her in awe. Scarlett was quick in handling cases, not only because she was talented, but also because she had various connections. With the internal information gathered from 129, she had taken less than a week to return from the border. This made those on the 18th floor convinced by her.
"Team leader, what shall we do next?"
Easton walked in from the outside and offered her a cup of tea. Scarlett held her computer with one hand and took the cup of tea with the other. "Get my dog back." That dog was the military dog of Samuel's, Six. After Six's death, the dog had also retired. Scarlett had directly gone through the adoption procedures after that. The dog was very obedient, and it not only followed Scarlett, but also Luke and her 3 roommates. Easton left to pick up the dog. The video on Scarlett's computer showed an intermediate member of 129.
"The result of the feedback will take another half an hour. You have an hour."
"Thank you." Scarlett put down the cup and thanked him politely. After hanging up the video call, Scarlett opened the mail and compared the recent itinerary of Gerald sent by Section Chief Soup. Half an hour later, she got up and called Section Chief Soup. Section Chief Soup was at the coffee shop with Jacob and the others. Not many outsiders knew about the Grant family, but Jacob's childhood friends were all aware. At this time, the group all stopped downstairs in the coffee shop.
"He'll more or less have news in his hands, but I don't know if he'll reveal it."
Section Chief Soup stood calmly at the gate and nodded at Kyle.
He's Stanley Yearling, the organizer of the international case. This person has a very impressive resume, and Investigator Grant didn't manage to invite him over, even after asking thrice.
With that said, both Jacob and Kyle realized how difficult it was. As they were talking, Section Chief Soup answered a phone call. At the same time, 2 bodyguards appeared at the hotel entrance. They directly approached Jacob and Thomas and tried to negotiate with them. Both of them had contacted Mr. Yearling beforehand, but his assistant hadn't applied for an appointment for them. They had no choice but to make the next move.
Who are those people?
Stanley glanced at them.
Gerald's son,
the assistant replied. Stanley nodded slightly. He knew about Fulton and the investigation department, but didn't want to be involved in this muddy water. Without stopping, he left directly under the protection of the 2 bodyguards. He didn't even bother looking at Jacob and Kyle.
Oh no!
Kyle turned to Section Chief Soup.
He doesn't want to see us.
Let alone seeing him, they couldn't even get close to him.
It's very normal. He's a frequent visitor to other international summits, and even Northwestern University has given in for his courses before.
Thomas had already checked this information. Before Mr. Yearling got into the car, a car stopped behind. A woman got out of the taxi. Mr. Soup, I have something to ask you. Easton had driven Scarlett's car, so she had come in a taxi. After paying the taxi driver, she walked over to Section Chief Soup and asked him about Investigator Grant. Has Uncle Grant gone to these 3 locations? She turned on her computer and showed him an email where 3 red dots were marked on the map.
Yes.
Section Chief Soup confirmed the 3 addresses and nodded. Then, I know where and what he's doing, Scarlett murmured. Jacob and Kyle were still shocked to see Scarlett here and had yet to recover. Mr. Yearling, who had just arrived at the door, turned his head and raised an eyebrow at her.
Scarlett?
Returning to her senses, Scarlett turned towards the voice and recognized Toby's distant relative. Grandpa Yearling.
You know one another?
Grandpa Yearling glanced at Jacob and the others, then closed the car door. He weighed the pros and cons for a moment and then said,
Follow me upstairs.
Then he said to the hotel manager,
The hotel isn't open for business today.
Episode 669. Can we talk?
I heard from Harvey that you and Samuel are in this industry,
said Mr. Yearling as he glanced around but failed to see Samuel. Because of Toby, the Yearling family's overall economy hadn't shrunk and had been taken over by the agent he hired. At the sudden mention of Samuel, Scarlett was taciturn and didn't say anything. The others didn't notice her reaction. Section Chief Soup was also surprised that Scarlett knew Mr. Yearling, but he could still easily accept this shock. He turned to Thomas and said,
Go in first.
Kyle retracted his chin and wanted to ask further, but he didn't dare to and followed Section Chief Soup in. He only whispered in Thomas's ear.
What did Mr. Yearling call that beauty just now? Did you hear it?
Thomas glanced at him and said simply,
Scarlett.
Kyle stood rooted to the ground and muttered silently,
This name sounds quite familiar.
The group followed Mr. Yearling into the room.
Gerald already found me 2 months ago, but this matter is a little big.
Mr. Yearling still didn't agree. He looked at the red dot marked on Scarlett's computer and paused.
You've already found it?
He's at Rosecliff Mansion. Scarlett glanced at him. I'm not too sure who put him under house arrest. Of course, the people in Fulton dared not murder Gerald, unless they could guarantee that the process would create an accident where no one could find out the truth, including Michael. Otherwise, the entire city would have to be lifted off. The only way was to slowly transfer power after Gerald had been removed. These old foxes played very sly tricks.
The international people at Fulton have a very strong intelligence network. Don't fight against them. I'm afraid that your whereabouts are already in the hands of their spies.
This was why Mr. Yearling closed up the hotel today. He knew Scarlett had discovered some things, and he only reminded her again.
Gerald must have had his reasons for not letting you take part in this matter. You must remember, being an inspector is a dangerous job.
Scarlett smiled. No one knows that better than me. They conversed for a while more, during which Jacob, Section Chief Soup, and the others didn't talk for over 10 minutes. Kyle was very talkative by nature. He slung his arm over one of the man's shoulders and raised his chin towards Scarlett.
She knows him?
He asked in a lowered voice. Section Chief Soup also looked over.
You mean Scarlett?
The man saw that Kyle and Scarlett knew each other and didn't conceal it either. He said seriously,
She's the great god of Northwestern University's politics and law department, the dark horse of last year's debate world championship contest. She's the protege of Northwestern University's politics and law department for sure. I heard she was promoted 3 levels above an intern in the investigation department.
Section Chief Soup finally spoke.
It wasn't 3 levels.
After a pause, he said again,
It's 4 levels now. Rosecliff Mansion.
Section Chief Soup didn't wait for the others to react and directly turned around to say in a solemn voice,
According to what Mr. Yearling said, our every move must be under their observations. But it's much better now that we know where Investigator Grant is. He said that the other party's intelligence network is very strong and they're basically invincible. Aren't we left defenseless then?
Kyle didn't understand this and only frowned.
Are they really so powerful? Yes, those from Interpol have always been pervasive.
Section Chief Soup was full of worries.
If so,
be it Interpol or Gerald's case, Jacob, Kyle, and Thomas were completely powerless. It was no exaggeration to say that they didn't understand what Scarlett was discussing with Mr. Yearling.
If so,
Kyle walked to the window and took a look outside. Then he remembered how they had almost been caught in the mountain.
Are we really being watched? If they can monitor us,
Section Chief Soup thought about it.
Then we can beat them at their own game.
That doesn't help at all. Kyle scratched his head.
You said that they are all pervasive and very powerful, but we haven't even found Uncle Grant, let alone them.
Scarlett sent Mr. Yearling out first. Then she turned around and, upon hearing this, just walked to the table and clicked on the email she just received now. After glancing through it and checking that there was no problem, she turned the computer and showed it to Section Chief Soup. It's these few people, right? Section Chief Soup, Jacob, and the others all looked at her computer. It was a file. There were 5 people on the top line, both domestic and foreign. Each of them had a name underneath. At the bottom right corner was 129's logo. Scarlett had long known that someone was following her. It had happened after she accidentally saved Jacob. So, she had asked to investigate Gerald and finally discovered these people. With these key figures, Section Chief Soup and Gerald were basically invincible. Fulton would definitely dare not act rashly. So what was left with Gerald's counterattack? While deep in thought, Scarlett's phone rang with a call from Samuel. Her calm expression changed, and she quickly picked up.
Where are you?
Samuel's voice sounded a little anxious, and he was gasping for breath. I'm in Evanston. I'll go back soon, Scarlett whispered. Samuel leaned against the wall and relaxed.
It's nothing.
After hanging up, Scarlett handed the computer to Section Chief Soup and said in a hurry, I'm going back to the neighboring city. She sent a message to Easton to bring the dog back and directly walked out. Still silent, Jacob glanced at Scarlett's expression. He had always been the hot and cold type, and at this time, he squeezed his hands and finally followed her. Kyle remembered only one person who could make Jacob behave like this. He turned his head and asked Thomas. "That girl." Thomas stared at Scarlett's back. "She's Jacob's ex-girlfriend." "What?" Kyle almost exclaimed. "The woman who made trouble in the bar last time and almost caused the police to harm Victoria?" Thomas shook his head. "I think it might not have been an unreasonable fit." He picked up his phone and sent a message to Bessy. "Can we talk about Scarlett?" Episode 670. They weren't curious about Samuel's unknown friend. It was regarding Scarlett. Thomas's proposal was reasonable. Bessy thought for a while before agreeing to meet the next day. However, Bessy was busy and they met somewhere near Northwestern University's research center. It was the first time Thomas went to Northwestern University since his graduation. He stopped his car by the side of the road. Then, he got down and looked around. In about 5 minutes, he saw Bessy come out of the physics laboratory. Her hair was messy because she had just removed her cap, and she still had a wild look in her eyes. It was like the first time they met years ago. Everything changed, except her. "You must have waited for a while." Bessy put the letter in her pocket and nodded at him. Thomas was holding on to a jacket. Even though one of his hands was occupied, he was still charming. He answered, "It's regarding Jacob and Scarlett." Thomas was the most concerned with them. Hence, he knew everything that went on between them. Even though Jacob hadn't mentioned it, he had been drinking more recently. He even smoked again. He had never thought that the two of them would break up because of others. Scarlett was so firm in her decision to break up that he would have never imagined that she actually decided. Bessy stopped him when the topic moved on to drugs and said, "Let's get into the car." As they got in the car, Thomas said everything after going through it in his head. Bessy leaned back and closed her eyes after hearing the entire story. After a while, she spoke coldly. "Do you have time?" Thomas turned to look at her. Bessy locked the car and replied, "We're going to 2 places." She wanted to go to the mathematical department of Northwestern University. Thomas knew about the other famous schools in Northwestern University. He drove to the mathematical department without questioning her. Bessy shut her eyes and leaned on the seat during the ride. Bessy put on a mask after getting out of the car. There were 8 photos in the lobby of the mathematical department. Thomas looked at the first picture. It must be a picture of a famous mathematician, but he didn't know who it was. "That's Mr. Hans Kramer." Bessy introduced him. "He has solved a lot of algorithmic problems." Thomas didn't know much about the mathematical world. Bessy didn't speak and continued walking, stopping at the last picture. That photo was the last and newest photo of the bunch. The person in the photo looked cheerful and full of energy. There was a mathematical formula at the bottom of the picture. He knew some symbols used, but not when they were in the formula together. This was a predictive model, and this person was the first to write it out. Although he didn't prove it, it was a significant contribution to the physics world. Bessy said, "He would have been able to prove it if he had more time." Thomas suddenly stopped. He saw the name of the person, Harry Rogers. "He's dead now," Bessy said calmly. "Let's go." Thomas followed her out of the building while still shocked. Bessy got into the back seat, shut her eyes and said, "Let's go to the Founders Hall." Thomas turned on the GPS. It was the first time he was at the Founders Hall. Bessy took 3 white flowers, and so did Thomas. There were some sculptures and even some military personnel on duty. Bessy went to 3 of the sculptures at the side. She then placed the 3 white flowers in front of the sculptures. She continued, "The one in the center is Scarlett's grandfather. The ones at the side are her parents. Her dad was a narcotics police officer. Her family was captured after the 719 explosion because their information was exposed. Her brother was tortured, and her parents were killed in front of her." Thomas didn't know what to say. He just remembered that even though she had always been shy, Scarlett spoke to everyone in the bar.
It's their fault.
Why should she forgive them? Bessy asked as she turned towards him. Thomas was taken aback. He never knew about this. He finally understood what Scarlett was thinking of when she was deemed by everyone to be unreasonable. After a long while, he pursed his lips, bowed 3 times to the sculptures, and said,
I'm so sorry.
You shouldn't ask others to forgive if you don't know the context. Bessy continued. Her brother was so close to proving his formula. Bessy didn't ask Thomas to send her back. She stood at the door and asked someone to investigate Scarlett. Then, she got Patrick to pick her up. On the other side, when Scarlett went to the base in the neighboring city, only 1 room was left because of the packed schedule. Easton took the dog out for a walk and said,
Team leader, I can sleep on the floor tonight.
He then continued,
Are you showering?
Scarlett shook her head. She then opened her luggage and looked for her laptop. As she was searching for her laptop, someone rang the doorbell. Easton opened the door and exclaimed,
Captain Bright?
Samuel looked at him and frowned.
You guys are staying in the same room?
Easton explained,
There's no other room.
Samuel didn't say a word. He went to Scarlett, put her laptop in her luggage, and then held her hands, saying,
Let's go to my house.
Scarlett was silent. Samuel led her out, and Scarlett saw quite a few people, but she only knew Mr. Palmer. Another lady was surprised to see her. Scarlett remembered her as the person she saw at the Borders previously.
You guys can head off first. I'll come over when I bring her back.
Samuel nodded at them before holding Scarlett's hands. They remained shocked until after Samuel left.
Samuel is bringing her to his house? Susie, have you been to his house before?
The lady didn't answer him, but she glared at him. Samuel was usually crude. Even though the Bright family had a lot of real estate, he was always easygoing. Hence, even though Susie asked him about it, Samuel didn't agree to her request. It was strange. Susie looked at Mr. Palmer and asked, Who is she? Mr. Palmer answered,
It's Miss Rogers.
He left after answering her. Susie thought for a while, then, remembering her name, she asked, Scarlett Rogers?
Susie, you know her?
Someone asked. Susie answered, She's just an orphan. She works in the same place as Samuel. She became a team leader after she graduated. The person was shocked.
I never knew that Samuel had this side to him. No wonder he was so worried when he saw her car parked downstairs.
He stopped after he saw the look on Susie's face.
But he's not good at judging girls' characters. This woman is just using him. I can't get why he can't understand this.
At the lounge, Scarlett and Samuel entered. There was already a crowd cheering inside. Samuel wasn't curious. He brought Scarlett to a corner and asked for a glass of milk from the attendant. Only he and Michael would ask for milk at a place like this. Even though Samuel didn't want to draw attention to himself, someone saw him and said,
Samuel is here. Quick, take a look at this. Susie brought you a drink.
Scarlett sipped on her milk and looked in their direction. Samuel took a look at the bill and said,
No, thank you. I'm not participating tonight.
He wasn't here for games today. His target was nearby, and that was why he brought Scarlett along. There was a red dot on his phone. Scarlett knew what it meant. She placed the milk on the table and said, You should go first. Samuel looked at her and said,
Don't bother about them then.
It was only when he headed out that the crowd dared to look at Scarlett. Susie then said, Miss Rogers, don't be surprised. Samuel often has to do such things because of his job. Scarlett smiled and didn't reply.
How could Samuel leave you all alone? He didn't introduce you to us.
One of the guys said smilingly.
I'm Albert Brown. I grew up together with Samuel and Susie. Has he mentioned us before?
Scarlett only knew Marvin and Michael. She never heard Samuel mention anything about Albert before. She shook her head and replied, I thought that his only friend was Big Brother Soup. She never knew that Samuel had other friends. Albert asked,
Big Brother Soup?
Susie turned away and continued holding a gun. Albert didn't continue. He then turned away and asked,
Susie, could you hit the money bag at the bottom?
The others joined in the commotion as well. They weren't curious about Big Brother Soup at all. Episode 671, The One with the Most Seniority. Samuel was holding his walkie-talkie. Just when he was about to enter the room, his phone rang. He looked at his phone and saw that it was Bessy.
Are you in the neighboring city?
Bessy asked, changing into her protective gear to enter the laboratory. Samuel didn't head upstairs. He leaned against the wall and fiddled with his lighter as he answered.
I'm watching the case. I'm heading to the camp tomorrow.
There weren't as many camps here as compared to the capital. They intended to send Samuel to boost morale. He would be placed in the Evanston Special Training Camp. Marvin and Sergeant Baldwin couldn't compare to him, but in certain areas, his credibility was very strong. Bessy was done changing. She then paused for a while before speaking.
Let's talk about Scarlett.
Samuel didn't investigate what went on between Scarlett and Jacob out of respect for her privacy. Hence, he never knew what went on between them. It was only after Bessy explained to him he realized what happened between them.
I should have known,
Samuel said, and he stopped fiddling with his lighter. As he faced the lamp at the side of the road, he tried smiling but couldn't. He was reminded of the homeless guy opposite the investigation department. They had a long chat. But all Samuel remembered from the conversation were 2 sentences.
I'm alive so that I can witness the rising sun for my family. I want to see this world that they can't see anymore.
He understood that the homeless person was no longer living for himself. Samuel could never understand what she went through. When a police officer died in his line of service, the public would perceive it as losing a hero. However, for their family, they lost a loved one. They lost a father, a son, or a husband. Samuel was reminded of the first time they met. She was standing outside of the school doctor's office, asking for medication to treat mental illness. The more he thought about it, the more it hurt. Her dream was to travel the world as a photographer, Bessy said as she leaned against the doorframe while looking at the end of the hallway. She became an investigator so that she could continue her father's work. She opened up so much to you. I'm relieved that she's with you now. Bessy didn't want to be too explicit. During her term break that lasted half a year, Samuel was the one taking care of Scarlett. Bessy was relieved. Bessy felt she was a boring person. Samuel was the better candidate to take care of her as he was caring and funny. Samuel squatted down with a lit cigarette. He then waited until the smell disappeared before heading upstairs.
Samuel, look at this. Miss Cooper has shot 6 bags. No wonder she's from the military school. She's great at this.
They crowded around Samuel after realizing that he had returned. Susie was highly regarded among this group of people. Even though she wasn't looking at him, she was still paying attention to him. Samuel kept his hand in his pocket. He didn't bother with them and walked towards Scarlett. He then realized that she drank more than the milk. She drank a beer as well. Scarlett wasn't much of a drinker because of her father's influence. Samuel had never seen her drink before. She was a really stubborn girl. The first time Samuel realized how stubborn she truly was when a teacher asked her to call her parents in for a conference and she refused no matter what the teacher said. Samuel didn't want to admit it, but he was secretly happy when he heard Scarlett broke up with Jacob. She grew up with Bessy after all. Samuel knew that Scarlett would never get back together with him.
Let's go. I'll send you back,
Samuel said, regretting his decision. He should have gone to the parent-teacher conference with Michael. The rest of the children would have their parents or boyfriends attend the conference with them. Except her. All right. Scarlett stood up and followed him. Samuel then got his keys and waved goodbye to his friends.
Bye guys, have fun without me.
Samuel, you've just arrived. Samuel held the door open for Scarlett. When she exited, he then headed out and said,
I've something on tomorrow. I can't stay tonight.
The rest of them exchanged glances after they left. Samuel was the most friendly out of the entire circle, but it was the first time they saw him treat a girl like that. The rest of them kept silent and looked at Susie. The Bright family had been growing strong in the capital. Even though the Cooper family wasn't as powerful as the Bright family, it was still one of the oldest families. There were even talks about marriage between the two families. However, with the current situation, Susie slammed the gun and left without saying anything. The rest of them didn't dare to say anything. Samuel didn't bring Scarlett to his place. There were no sparks between them. He bought yogurt and some snacks for her. Scarlett picked up the yogurt. She realized that they were driving to the countryside and asked, "Where are we heading?" "We're heading to the camp, but it will take a while," Samuel said. "I'll wake you up when we arrive." He didn't want her to return to the capital so soon. Scarlett looked at him and asked, "Will I be chased out?" Samuel answered, "No." Scarlett didn't have a military rank, but she was from the Rogers family. Hence, it was all right for her to enter the camp. Furthermore, she was an investigator now. By the time Samuel went through the different checks, 3 hours had passed, and Scarlett was long asleep in the back seat. She must have been exhausted. She didn't even wake up when Samuel got out of the car to be inspected. "Captain, should I arrange for a room for Team Leader Rogers?" Mr. Palmer asked after being surprised by the sudden appearance of Scarlett in Samuel's back seat. "It's all right." Samuel shook his head. "She can stay in mine." The amenities here were really backward, but at least Samuel's lounge had a place for her to take a shower. Mr. Palmer thought that he understood what was going on and headed off. By the time Scarlett had woken up, the sun had risen. She could hear the whistle from outside. Scarlett headed out and saw Mr. Palmer sitting next to her window. "Team Leader Rogers, you're awake. Let me get you breakfast." Mr. Palmer stood up immediately and handed her breakfast. It was a simple meal. She thanked him and started to look around. Mr. Palmer knew who she was looking for. "Captain Bright is at the camp now. He's the investigator here. Shall I bring you to meet him after you're done with your meal?" "Can I?" Mr. Palmer kept his mess and said, "We're all family. I mean, countrymen. There's nothing you can't do. We have a really open policy here. Finish your breakfast and I'll take you there." One of the guards overheard what he said and looked at Mr. Palmer unbelievably. This wasn't the first time Scarlett was in a camp like this for special training. She had followed Bessy here before. Sergeant Baldwin had even asked her how to handle a rifle. The training here was 10 times the normal amount. When Scarlett got there, they were training at an obstacle course. They had to get over 15 obstacles and shoot perfectly. Scarlett saw that Samuel was recording something in his book. He wasn't an instructor, he was just observing what was going on here. "What do you think of them? Will some be selected for the international camp?" Samuel asked when he saw her. Scarlett looked at them and answered, "They might not even qualify for the one in the capital." Samuel knew that she was trained by Bessy. He already knew how good she was from Marvin and Sergeant Baldwin. Expecting that she would say something like that, he asked, "How do you think we can improve?" Scarlett thought for a while before answering, "We can know after they go through real combat." Samuel understood what she meant. He then replied thoughtfully, "I understand what you mean." He then continued to record things in his book. Scarlett handed her water to him and said, "Drink some water." Samuel drank and continued, "Do you have other suggestions?" He was so thirsty that he accidentally touched her finger with his chin. Scarlett withdrew her hand and started to drink another drink that Samuel bought last night. She looked at him. He was really handsome. Samuel never knew that when girls visited the school doctor's office, they weren't looking at Michael. They were looking at him. This was because Michael was too handsome, making the girls from the Bright Bow High School insecure. The next day, "I disagree," Susie said in the barracks in front of everyone. Samuel had gathered every instructor and the 2 commanding officers. Samuel looked at her and asked, "For the past 2 years, our city had 0 candidates going into the capital's camp. Could you tell me the reason why you disagree with changing the way this camp is run?" Susie pouted. She looked at Samuel and grabbed his book. She then pointed at a portion with very nice handwriting and asked, "Samuel, did you write this?" "No, it was suggested by someone else. It was planned by a professional." Samuel answered truthfully, "I thought that the suggestions were valid." Scarlett had planned it all out overnight. She even consulted Marvin, Sergeant Baldwin, and rushed it out with Samuel through the night. Samuel, not only have you allowed a commoner to enter the camp, you've asked her for suggestions. Does she know what she's doing? Does she understand what we're doing in this camp? Does she even know how to handle a rifle? I can't imagine that you have allowed her to do all of this. This is a special training camp, not your home. You must be dreaming to think that I would allow my men to follow your suggestions. When Samuel came over a few years ago, everyone knew that Susie and he had something on. Only she would dare to speak to him in this manner. Everyone just laughed it off and didn't dare to answer her. Samuel immediately calmed down and realized that he should have said it differently. Scarlett really was just a commoner to them. He took a deep breath before answering. I'm sorry. Let me report this through the official channels, but do take a look at this. He planned to contact Sergeant Baldwin for help. It would be more effective with an official report. He was too hasty. It wasn't something to joke around with. Some of the instructors took a look before leaving. Samuel could tell that they didn't take a proper look at his work. He pursed his lips. If it was a few years ago, he would have scolded all of them. Samuel, I feel that we should let the first group try this. One of the instructors said, The first group has always been the lousiest. I want to try. At the camp, Scarlett was at a corner looking at Samuel discussing something with the team leader of the first group. The commanders of the base were there as well. Even though they were smiling, they didn't seem happy. Could they perceive Samuel as the god of hell? Samuel was holding on to the schedule and chatting with the first group's team leader. He looked up and saw that she was looking at them. Scarlett smiled. She was really fair, allowing her to stand out from the rest. It was a different vibe seeing her wearing just a shirt and short pants on a military base. Samuel suddenly put the schedule down. The commanders and team leader were confused and asked, Sir? Samuel kept silent. He waved his hand at Scarlett and asked her to come over. Scarlett didn't know what he was up to and looked at him. Give me some water. Samuel took her water bottle. He then walked to the first row of the soldiers, borrowed 2 rifles, and passed them to Scarlett. He then pointed at the target and said, Try to hit that. The commanders were shocked. Sir, Samuel looked at them and said, Just you wait. If they looked at seniority, even Sergeant Baldwin would have to address Scarlett as an older sister. Episode 672. Scarlett's Teacher Revealed. Samuel knew that, thanks to Marvin, Sergeant Baldwin had been specially trained by Bessy before. In that case, Sergeant Baldwin was still below Scarlett. Sergeant Baldwin's reputation in the special training camp was too high. Marvin often carried around his shovel and studied flowers, so only the Clark family and a few people in the country knew that he was, in fact, more powerful than Sergeant Baldwin. Over here, only a few officials knew, while the other ordinary soldiers weren't in the know. Therefore, Sergeant Baldwin's name was much easier to use than Marvin's. Bessy already knew about the Grant family and Jacob's matters. Even if the basic case was finished here, Samuel would never let Scarlett return to Evanston now. Bessy had already told him anyway to take Scarlett to play. Scarlett also stayed in the area for a while. She took out the 2 guns from Samuel's hand and whispered, Then I'll try. She also felt like the design inside was a little unreasonable. Don't be nervous, Samuel whispered. Scarlett rolled up her sleeves. Okay. Standing aside with his little umbrella, Mr. Palmer glanced at the other people standing around, especially the 2 chiefs. The 2 chiefs were still wondering what Samuel meant by Sergeant Baldwin's senior. But at this moment, Scarlett had already started. They watched as she neatly crossed the first obstacle, then opened their mouths and asked Mr. Palmer, Why is this young lady using 2 guns? Mr. Palmer didn't dare to speak. After all, there was no other double-gun marksman in Evanston. After watching for a minute, the expressions of everyone present were in a daze. 5 minutes later, Scarlett had already shot 16 bullseye with the 2 guns. Everyone present was speechless. The 2 chiefs, who originally wanted to ask what Scarlett was doing with 2 guns, were also speechless. Scarlett came back from the side and found that everyone was staring at her. She couldn't help but lower her head and pick up her pace. She didn't like it and wasn't used to being stared at. She returned the 2 guns to Samuel. Samuel gave the 2 guns to the 2 chiefs before looking up and facing everyone seriously.
Do you have any questions now?
Everyone, including the instructor of the assault team, was suddenly full of fighting spirit.
No. From now on, follow the special training plan.
With a wave of his hand, everyone on the school field rushed towards the obstacle. The instructor of the assault team blew his whistle before walking to Samuel. He glanced at him as he recorded data and excitedly asked,
Did she train in the International Special Training Camp?
No. Samuel glanced at him.
She's just doing it for fun.
The instructor paused and stared at him. Samuel raised an eyebrow.
I'm not kidding. She's from the investigation department and is indeed doing it as a hobby, but she does have an amazing teacher.
He finished speaking and continued modifying the data. The instructor didn't dare to ask him again and instead asked the 2 officers who followed up.
I heard that the young lady has a particularly good teacher.
Yeah, one of them glanced at him.
Her teacher was Senior Officer Baldwin's teacher. Impressive, right?
The instructor was speechless. He shouldn't have asked. The 2 officers stood together and summed up.
Do you want to improve this special training model? Not for the time being. Wait for the results of the first team, and we'll do it if they don't improve. If you change it now, Susie and the others will definitely not be convinced. We'll let the facts speak for themselves.
Another man shook his head. Susie had obviously been hostile towards Scarlett, so letting them be convinced themselves was better than forcing them to obey orders.
Let's go for lunch.
At the beginning of July, the sun shone brightly above. Samuel looked at the time and beckoned directly to Scarlett. He had asked Mr. Palmer to bring along a camera, which Scarlett used to film the process of their special training. Perhaps because everyone knew she was an apprentice to a very important person, nobody stopped her from taking pictures and even trained harder on the special training field. Scarlett put down the camera and followed him to the cafeteria. There was nothing special here, so they all went to the cafeteria together.
Go over there.
Samuel took 2 plates and told Scarlett to sit by the corner window. Scarlett also wanted to sort out her photos first, so she went over there first. Mr. Palmer only took 1 serving and soon came over. He sat down opposite her and curiously asked now that he felt close to her,
Has your marksmanship always been so accurate?
It's okay. Scarlett was flipping through the photos.
Then, when you took military classes at Northwestern University, didn't the 1st District Space try to poach you?
Mr. Palmer was in disbelief, as it didn't make sense to him. Would the 1st District give up such a golden opportunity? Scarlett looked up at him. No, because someone else in the same military training session was even more impressive. Mr. Palmer's eyes widened.
No way. Who?
Were college students so impressive nowadays? There were only a handful of people who could compare to Scarlett's marksmanship here. But a classmate from the university was even better than her?
Really?
The 2 officers who had just arrived were also in disbelief. Speaking of Bessy, Scarlett raised her head and smiled, her dark eyes very bright. If there's the opportunity when I return to Evanston, I'll introduce you to her. Mr. Palmer took a bite of rice and nodded.
Okay.
Samuel had already taken the servings and came back to sit opposite her. At this time, there were already a lot of people in the cafeteria, but Scarlett realized that their table was quite empty. There wasn't anyone around either, but other places were particularly crowded. Mr. Palmer frowned and said,
"They're afraid."
The name Samuel Bright carried a heavy weight in Evanston, and he had even been specially sent for investigation. Samuel hadn't gotten a big serving for Scarlett, but because the weather was hot, she only finished half of it. The people here had a large appetite and rarely had leftovers. Glancing at her, Samuel knocked on his plate. Scarlett poured the rest of her food onto his plate, quite accustomed to it. Oofed. Mr. Palmer, who was eating, almost choked himself to death. The commando captain and the two officers sitting across also fell silent. Both Scarlett and Samuel glanced at Mr. Palmer. Mr. Palmer was silent for a while and then said,
"Nothing."
After eating, he thoughtfully followed them. The two officers dared not talk much beside them.
"Shit,"
Mr. Palmer exclaimed at the sudden thought of something. The two officers were taken aback.
"What's wrong?"
Mr. Palmer was silent for a moment.
I know who her teacher is."
Episode 673, Samuel's Call. Bessy's affairs had made a lot of noise in that freshman year. Later on, all kinds of things had happened, and Bessy's military training incident had decreased in popularity. However, Mr. Palmer remembered Samuel telling him about her. After all, Samuel had boasted about Bessy to many people. In the past 2 years, Mr. Palmer and Samuel had gone through life and death matters, and he was also his confidant. He had gone to the Bright family to help Samuel and had even tracked and protected Scarlett for him before. He had a fair understanding of Samuel and the Bright family's situation. He had also talked with the 5 Clark brothers before. Now, he suddenly remembered that he had heard of Miss Miller's matters before, and that she had been the one to teach Marvin. Counting further, Scarlett hadn't caused an enormous wave at the beginning because someone had been more impressive than her. Normal people would think that this was impossible. But that girl really wasn't normal.
"Mr. Palmer, who on earth is it?"
The two officers were very curious. Mr. Palmer was silent for a while. Then he simply said,
"The woman who beat Austria's thugs to the ground."
Samuel returned to his room. Samuel's mother called at that moment. He glanced at Scarlett, who was on the computer editing photos, and went outside with his phone.
"You haven't called me recently."
Since Samuel started this business, his mother had been on pins and needles, especially the last time when he had been in a coma. She had fainted upon hearing the news, and Michael had called to report Samuel's safety to reassure her. With the sun shining brightly above his head, Samuel pressed his cap down, walked under a tree, and was too lazy to move.
"I was working overtime last night." "Are you so busy? If you can't handle it, just come back to the Bright family,"
his mother said.
"Everyone here is thinking of you."
Samuel habitually touched his ears and smiled.
"Maybe next time."
Samuel's mother didn't continue to entangle with this matter. She took a cup of tea, cleared her throat, and said after a long pause,
I just heard from someone that there's a girl with you."
Samuel thought about it and knew that someone from the club that night had probably informed her. They probably hadn't dared to say much, including revealing Scarlett's name. After all, those people loved to play, so Samuel hadn't introduced Scarlett to them. Samuel's mother was a little displeased at his silence.
"You're behaving like a bachelor."
"It's Scarlett." Samuel thought for a while and finally said. Samuel's mother was shocked for a while before she said in astonishment,
"Do you have any plans?"
Glancing at the door, Samuel said,
"Don't worry about it. I'm hanging up. Bye."
He hung up before his mother had time to make a fuss. In Evanston, his mother glanced apologetically at the person in front of her.
Auntie, you know this child. He doesn't listen to me much. The middle-aged woman hurriedly said, No, it's all right. I only came to pass you the word. Smiling, Samuel's mother sent the middle-aged woman out. According to Samuel's current status, no one in the Bright family could touch him. Samuel was nearly 30 years old and was still single, so several people were eyeing him, especially those from the Bright family. Naturally, she also hoped that he would marry an appropriate match, whose status would be good for everyone. After hearing about the unclear relationship between Samuel and a strange woman, the Bright family members had eagerly come to Samuel's mother to find out the news. She stood at the door and watched the middle-aged woman leave. Raising an eyebrow, she picked up her phone again and called Samuel again. Samuel had yet to enter the door.
Mom.
You finally have this opportunity. If you still can't handle it, you'd have wasted all the good words I put in for you before. You must work harder, Samuel's mother said irritably. Samuel was about to say something. She didn't even wait for him to reply. Don't tell me. Go and say it to Scarlett. Your words just make me angry. Without waiting for a reply, she hung up with a pop. Samuel stared at his phone for a long time, only to remember that his mother had the same temper as Bessy. Touching his nose, he sniffed and walked back inside. Scarlett was still editing the photos. I plan to organize these photos later, said Scarlett in an unbelievably pleasant voice when she heard his return. She continued adjusting the software library without looking up. Samuel took a look and still couldn't understand the difference between the pictures. He just thought it already looked very pleasing to the eye. Do you want Clarissa to help you? Scarlett smiled. No need. These should be secrets. I'll keep them for my own appreciation. Okay then. It's up to you. Samuel went to get a cup to pour water. Scarlett saved the photos and looked back at him. She was in a daze. For so many years, no one except Bessy and Luke knew that her original wish was to be a photographer, not an investigator. When she saw the camera today, she had indeed felt an inexplicable wave of emotions. In the afternoon, Samuel went to inspect as usual. Scarlett was also worried about the effect of her arrangement in the assault team, so she took her computer and continued editing photos while watching them. Mr. Palmer followed her all the way. So did the two officers. The instructor of the first assault team realized that Scarlett was very easygoing and gentle, so he approached her for shooting advice. Mr. Palmer and the two officers still looking at the computer. You were talking about the underground boxing arena. The two officers began. Suddenly, a dialogue box with black text popped up on the computer page. Tell Samuel to call me. Episode 674. Gerald Returns. This dialogue box wasn't like the normal ones and looked rather strange. Scarlett had only opened the photo editing software on her computer and hadn't opened any messaging software. In particular, the message appeared word by word. The other party waited for a while and didn't receive a reply. Seemingly a little impatient, the other party sent another message, with only a question mark. Although Mr. Palmer and the two officers couldn't see the other party, they still felt an inexplicable sense of pressure upon seeing this simple question mark. When Scarlett came back, the three of them didn't dare to move toward the question mark that was now obviously a font size larger. Team Leader Rogers, this... Mr. Palmer glanced at her and pointed at the computer. With a bottle of water in one hand, Scarlett looked down. She knew who it was the moment she saw the dialogue box. She typed a line, telling Bessy that Samuel's mobile phone was muted, and he was with her, so she would find him with the phone. After she left, Mr. Palmer and the others exchanged glances. They didn't dare to ask further. After all, few people in Evanston dared to call Samuel by his full name.
Not even the Bright family members dared to do so.
Why is she looking for me?
Samuel took the phone, thinking about how Bessy had the same temper as his mother. He couldn't help but rub his nose. Scarlett glanced at him. It seems a little urgent. Without asking further, Samuel quickly picked up the phone and called Bessy. Find a quiet place. Bessy had just returned home from the research room. She threw a baby bottle to Aiden for him to drink and said once Samuel had found a quiet place. Scarlett moved information about Fulton last time. She dug out the information of minions in Fulton. Having received Michael's guidance, Samuel was much smarter now. He glanced at Scarlett not far away and asked,
When I bring her back 2 days later, can they still support it?
Fulton might not have any evidence to capture Gerald, but the Grant family might reveal a clue. He wasn't too pleased about bringing Scarlett back now. Bessy glanced at Aiden, who also glanced at her expressionlessly. Then, he climbed from one side of the sofa to the other, gave Bessy a place and continued drinking milk. Bessy sat down on the sofa and propped her legs up casually. No one in your special training camp is promoted to the 1st district. You'll have to change the leader. Samuel wasn't worried about this and smiled easily.
Don't worry.
After hanging up, he walked over to Scarlett, who was looking down and stepping on the shadow of a tree.
Let's go back. They still have to practice later,
Samuel said calmly without mentioning the Grant family. He had the same view as Bessy on this point. Scarlett didn't ask further, because she was still thinking about the pictures. After returning, she took off her clothes and went to take a bath. The living condition here was very simple. The bathroom was a very small separate one, located inside the room she stayed in. The structure of the room was simple. Samuel was discussing the improvement of the training with Mr. Palmer and several others. As for the instructors who had previously opposed it, especially Susie, Samuel had assigned them to the training camp farthest away, so they wouldn't be an eyesore any longer. They were still talking when Scarlett's phone rang. Samuel glanced over at her. It was Scarlett's aunt, but he didn't pick up and waited for the call to disconnect. After a while, her cell phone rang again. It was still from her aunt. Afraid that something urgent had happened, Samuel raised his hand to stop them first and opened a very small gap in the bathroom.
Hey, your aunt called 3 times. Did something urgent happen?
Tell her to call again later. Scarlett raised her voice in the bathroom. Samuel closed the door and picked it up. Before he could say anything, he heard the crackling sound of a female. Scarlett, are you graduating this year? Your uncle has been nagging about your work. If you don't have one, come back home. Your uncle and I are still here. Samuel knew that this was Scarlett's only relative. In the beginning, when Scarlett knew that the drug lords had found their home, she had never dared to return to her uncle's home, for fear that they would come for retribution. She didn't dare to recognize them, and even a phone call had to be covered by Bessy. At the time of her parents' funeral, she hadn't notified her uncle either. Samuel still respected her aunt very much, and he politely told her to call again later. The aunt paused for a moment and then asked, a little nervously, "Who are you? What's your relationship with Scarlett? Why did you pick up her phone?" She shot forth with 3 consecutive questions. Samuel cleared his throat.
I'm her friend.
He didn't dare to say that she was taking a shower. After Scarlett changed her clothes, she went out with her cell phone and returned the call. When she returned to the house, Samuel was still discussing matters with the others. She glanced at him, remained silent, and went out with her computer. The next day, the decision was implemented because of Michael's intervention, and all training models were improved. There were 10 special training teams in the special training camp. Other than the first assault team, the instructors of the other team didn't understand it.
Isn't this ridiculous?
Someone frowned and said,
Our training never needed to reach a set standard, but they're still making this change.
The instructor of the first assault team was about to leave, but upon hearing such complaints, he said easygoing,
Samuel isn't messing around. You'll know the effect after training for a while.
You're always in the last place. Of course you're not in a hurry. Susie didn't want to listen to him and directly said, You can use it if you want, but I won't. She turned and left. She was from the Cooper family and had a pretty big influence here with her words, so the others just fell silent. Many people also left with her. Only 2 people looked at the instructor of the first team. They were familiar with each other, so they asked him in a low voice, "Do you have any inside information?" "Yeah." He thought for a while and said, "The team leader used 5 minutes to clear my 16 obstacles. Do you know who her junior is? Sergeant Baldwin." One day later at the Grant family's house, Victoria and Kyle were comforting Lily. "Auntie, it's all right now, don't worry." Victoria poured a cup of tea and comforted her. "My dad is already inquiring about it." Lily took the cup. "Yes, it'll be all right. Victoria, you're such a good child." After the Grant family's incident broke out, Victoria and a few of Jacob's friends visited. Seeing how Victoria had come to comfort her at these times, Lily felt like she had been right about her. Kyle listened to their conversation and just thoughtfully retracted his eyes from Victoria. They were still talking. Suddenly, the sound of police sirens came from outside. Lily, Victoria, and the others subconsciously felt uneasy. Within 3 minutes, a group of heavily armed officers came in. The person in the front was iron-faced and impartial. "We're from Fulton. Please come with us." Jacob and Section Chief Soup just got downstairs, and before Section Chief Soup could say anything, his phone was confiscated. However, he managed to send a message before that. "What rights do you have to arrest us?" Lily and Victoria weren't as calm and couldn't help but scream in horror. No one listened to them. "Lily, stop screaming. They won't listen." Section Chief Soup was still calm. "They're from Fulton. Even the Supreme Investigation Department can't control their business, so we can only wait for the result. Otherwise, even Investigator Grant would have no way." "Then, what should we do?" Lily and Victoria were already scared at the mention of the Supreme Investigation Department. Section Chief Soup stabilized himself. "Fulton's people are arresting us because they can't find Investigator Grant. Don't worry, we'll wait for him, but it might take a while." None of them understood the world of politics, but they still felt slightly relieved upon hearing Section Chief Soup's words. They stayed in the detention room all night. The next morning, Gerald rushed over after handling the incident in Fulton. At the sight of him, Lily and Victoria were overjoyed. Lily rushed over directly. "I'm so glad you're all right. Let's go out. I didn't even sleep last night." "These are the gifts you accepted?" Gerald tossed a list onto the table and stared at her with a heavy face. Immediately realizing that something was wrong, Lily quickly picked up the list and scanned through it. The above were all odds and ends, most of which she had purchased at the beauty salon. She shook her head and said with a pale face, "I've always been very careful and have never received gifts. These were all paid for by my friends, and I've paid for them before too. This is simply out of context. They can help me testify." As Lily, how could she not know the importance of accepting bribes? She had always been very cautious and didn't expect to be investigated. "I knew it." Gerald pressed his temples. "Section Chief Soup, your information this time has directly pulled the claws of the minions in Fulton. They won't rest without drawing blood. I'm sorry I've implicated you." "Then what should I do?" Lily looked up at him in a daze. "Fulton has always been so violent." Section Chief Soup shook his head and lowered his voice. "I was too reckless to publish their intelligence information." Gerald shook his head. "I'll go out to find someone first." Lily sat down blankly on a stool. "Section Chief Soup, Fulton." "Fulton has always been very fierce in handling matters. Investigator Grant almost fell into their conspiracy. This time, I'm afraid it's hard to come out unharmed. Those who play politics with them can't win over their conspiracies. Even the investigation department's martial arts can't defeat them either." Section Chief Soup shook his head and smiled wryly. "It's all right. I'm retiring in 3 months anyway. It's just that time is too tight, and we're all here." Lily was no longer thinking about how to get out, and all the information bombarded her mind. An hour later, Victoria and Kyle were brought out. Lily wanted to talk to Victoria, but she dropped her hands when she realized Victoria was avoiding her. It was Kyle who comforted Lily and Jacob. There were no clocks here, and they couldn't see the time, so Lily didn't know how much time had passed. The iron door suddenly opened, and the 3 people in the detention room suddenly raised their heads. Lily felt a little dizzy at the sight of a familiar person. "Why are you here?" Scarlett glanced at her and greeted her. "I'm here to take you out first." Lily never expected that the person to see them at this time would be Scarlett. "Scarlett, how are you going to do that?" She looked up at her and shook her head. "Your uncle hasn't come yet. Section Chief Soup said Fulton." Scarlett looked away. "Come with me." Lily glanced at Section Chief Soup, but didn't expect the previously apprehensive man to immediately follow her without hesitation. Outside, an officer stopped her. "Deputy Rogers, this is not in compliance." Scarlett glanced at him. Beside her, Samuel grabbed his weapon and pressed the peaked cap on his head impatiently. "If you want to play martial arts with us, I'm afraid you can't afford to." Episode 675. You Don't Have to Worry About Fulton. Since the Bright family was associated with the investigation department, it wasn't surprising they would take part in the fight with Fulton. The statuses of these two together were certainly more powerful than Gerald. The Bright family alone carried a heavy weight. After a long while, the man who had stopped them turned sideways and said with a gloomy expression, "Let them go." Scarlett walked in front with Samuel, talking to Section Chief Soup. "What evidence do they have?" "Accepting bribes." Section Chief Soup briefly went through the details. "Investigator Grant is also handling it." Scarlett nodded and pondered for a while. Section Chief Soup turned to Samuel, who wasn't too polite with him because of his friendship with Scarlett. But with Samuel's identity, he only said simply, "Samuel, if there's anything in the future, it'll be my duty to help." Lily and Jacob followed behind them. Jacob didn't understand the context of this incident and didn't know how much effort it had taken them to get out safely. "We'll leave now. Go find Investigator Grant. We'll take over and handle the rest of the matters with him." Samuel didn't really want to see Jacob. He gave Scarlett a simple glance, and his tone of voice improved a little upon seeing her calm expression. "We just came back from the neighboring city." Section Chief Soup watched Samuel leave without daring to say anything. Usually, he would ask Scarlett about her relationship with Samuel, but he was still in a daze now. After they had left, Lily slowly returned to her senses. She turned to Section Chief Soup. Who was that black-clothed young man? Where was he from? How did he bring them out so easily? Section Chief Soup looked away. That was Samuel from the Bright family. He didn't say more. Lily opened her mouth and wanted to ask how Scarlett knew him, but she couldn't find the right words. "You also know Miss Rogers?" she asked Section Chief Soup. She knew that Section Chief Soup was now Gerald's teammate in the investigation department and hence respected him, especially because of Gerald's incident a while back. "You mean Scarlett? Because of Investigator Grant's incident, she's temporarily acting as the deputy." At the mention of her, Section Chief Soup inexplicably felt proud, as if she was his own daughter. If she hadn't found the information in advance, Investigator Grant might have met his Waterloo. Completely stunned, Lily turned to look at Jacob and somehow uttered, "Oh, I see." Jacob didn't speak, nor did he withdraw his gaze. On the other side, Samuel took Scarlett to the outskirts of the city, and they went to visit Six's widow together. Six's son was over 2 months old now, and only Samuel came to see him. The others didn't dare to come, for fear that their family would be implicated. This was also the first time Scarlett visited him. The child didn't understand anything and loved smiling. He would laugh whenever Samuel teased him. "Samuel, you always bring so many things." The child's grandma shook her head. a smile on her old, wrinkly face. "You even said you'll be his godfather. You're really lucky. He smiles whenever he sees you." While Samuel teased the child, Scarlett sat aside and listened to the grandma. Samuel would change the gas tank for her every time he came. Scarlett listened on and glanced at him, smiling. He has always been a good man. When Bessy came abroad last time, Samuel would send her daily necessities every quarter. Scarlett and Bessy had always been very similar in their casual lifestyle and were both satisfied to just get by. Other than Bessy, only Samuel and the others never asked her why she wanted these drugs. Those filthy and inferior pasts that she had wanted to hide from Jacob now seemed like nothing in Samuel's place.
"I'll send you to Bessy first."
After they returned, Samuel turned the steering wheel and said,
"She's going to be impatient."
Leaning against the window, Scarlett nodded. Seeming to be lost in thoughts, Samuel glanced at her curiously, surprised that she was exceptionally quiet today. But at the thought of how she had met Jacob today, he also turned silent. When the car reached the Highline Apartments, he said in a low, muffled voice,
"We're here."
He got out of the car, opened the door, and followed Scarlett in silence. Usually rather talkative, he was rarely quiet today and watched her enter the elevator before he turned and left. Scarlett raised her hand and returned to her senses. She was about to say something to him when she realized he had already left. She waved to Samuel's back and pressed the elevator floor. When she went in, Marvin was sitting cross-legged on the carpet, making gestures to Aiden. Patrick closed the door and explained,
"He's teaching Aiden science. Look at this. What is it? Aiden, do you remember?"
Marvin held up a picture and asked. Aiden raised his head, glanced at him, and then looked down again. Marvin inexplicably felt like he was being looked down on and turned to Patrick instead.
"Brother."
Ignoring him, Patrick walked over to Michael.
"You and Samuel re-established the special training model?"
Michael put down the book in his hand and motioned Scarlett to sit down opposite him. Bessy was away and Scarlett was still a little terrified of Michael, so she responded softly. Michael leaned on the sofa and slightly tilted his head. He tapped his phone with his slender fingertips and was silent for a while.
"Then go to the 1st District tomorrow. As for Fulton, you don't have to worry."
Scarlett was immediately relieved to hear this. After all, there was nothing that Bessy and Michael couldn't do. Patrick stayed silent at the side. The people of Fulton were probably about to cry. Episode 676, Austria's Treaty. Scarlett waited for Bessy's return. Michael returned to the study to give a report to the 1st District. Patrick ignored the pleading look from Marvin and went inside to study with Michael, very surprised.
"You're letting Miss Rogers go to the 1st District?"
Michael turned on the computer and nodded. Staring at him, Patrick thought about how Michael had let Samuel handle the 1st District and smiled.
"Samuel won't have to worry this time."
With Michael helping him so much in both public and private affairs, Patrick was really at a loss if he couldn't figure it out himself. After all, after being attacked by his mother, Samuel had come to the most powerful brain, Michael, to analyze his affairs with Scarlett. Downstairs, Scarlett went to play with Aiden. When Aiden saw her, he immediately reached out his arms for a hug. He should have been the most playful at this age, but his parents were incomprehensible and didn't enjoy hugging him. Scarlett clearly saw Marvin's envious eyes. Bessy finally returned with Noah. When she came back, she saw Scarlett holding a milk bottle and feeding Aiden. Meanwhile, Marvin, Rosemary, and Patrick were all squatting beside her, full of envy. Bessy changed her shoes, placed her documents on the coffee table, and walked over.
"Bessy!"
Rosemary sat back seriously when she saw her and picked up a teacup in a dignified manner. The secretary standing behind Bessy gave a helpless look. There was no other choice. Bessy and Michael's child was just too invincible. He looked so beautiful, with long eyelashes and dark, bright eyes. When he looked at people, even the secretary had the sudden urge to pick all the stars in the sky for him. Not to mention Rosemary. Even Kenneth couldn't be serious with this little guy. Mr. Cooper. Miss Clark. Rosemary, Marvin, and the others greeted Noah. Noah took off the mask hanging on one ear and walked over to the sofa.
What are you teaching?
He looked at Aiden and was about to ask Marvin, but he trailed off before he finished his sentence. He could clearly see that Marvin was holding a list of various types of weapons. They were shooting guns, submachine guns, and even tanks. Originally thinking that Marvin was teaching the child how to read, Noah stood silently for a while and had to calm himself down. Go to the 1st District's special training area in 2 days, okay? Bessy took a sip of tea handed over by Marvin. She lowered her head, her eyes calm. Scarlett looked up. Me? Yeah. Wait until Fulton and my graduate students' matters are resolved. Bessy counted the time. She still felt a little uneasy. In the future, with her status in the investigation department, she would be in contact with many prisoners. Scarlett was still far below the standard of the International Special Training Camp. Patrick came downstairs and looked enviously at Scarlett upon hearing this. Once all the bosses had resolved their matters, Noah quietly turned to Bessy.
The song composition.
Bessy remembered that she hadn't composed music for Noah in several months. Give me 2 days, Bessy said casually. Noah wasn't surprised at all and faintly glanced at her.
It's okay, I'm shooting a live show in Evanston.
It was the 2nd season of the previous variety show. The entire of Evanston, including the Bright family, was dimly lit because of Fulton and the investigation department's affairs. However, the Highline Apartments was a peaceful area. After playing with the child for a while, Rosemary turned to Bessy with a headache.
When will those from Evanston leave? The security guards and the others are all crying.
She was talking about those who had bought real estate, including Kenneth, who was still drinking tea with James in the Miller family's house. Although Kenneth and the others didn't do anything in Evanston, the rest of the major families were still apprehensive. They had come to plead with Rosemary several times. After all, those few were either big bosses or terrorists. If a fight broke out amongst them, all hell would break loose. Ever since Bessy's marriage, they had come over from time to time, and Evanston was now their next gathering place. It seemed like Evanston was about to become the next Austria. With Austria's treaty, they dare not. Bessy shook her head.
Austria's treaty?
Noah repeated these unfamiliar words. Marvin explained.
The peace treaty between their forces.
Noah opened his mouth and glanced at Scarlett, who was without a doubt and curiosity. He finally decided not to ask what forces they meant. The next day, Scarlett received a call from Sergeant Baldwin early in the morning. Today, Sergeant Baldwin was bringing her to the 1st District. The main improvement of the plan was Sergeant Baldwin, after all. However, Scarlett still didn't know why Michael wanted her to go. Sergeant Baldwin respected Scarlett very much. Scarlett sat in the back seat while Sergeant Baldwin slowly drove the car onto the main road. Before the car reached the 1st District, she received a call from Gerald.
Scarlett,
Gerald said solemnly.
Where are you?
Scarlett reported her location.
Okay.
Gerald nodded.
Jacob's mother is on the ring road next to you. Help me bring her back. I'll go directly to the courthouse. I'm afraid Fulton will play tricks in the middle.
With Samuel around, Gerald's case was not a problem. However, Gerald's worries weren't unfounded. Fulton hadn't done such things once or twice. The only person Gerald could think of protecting Lily's safety was Scarlett. Scarlett asked Sergeant Baldwin if they could drive Lily despite the rush.
It's okay.
Sergeant Baldwin turned the car around. An old butler was standing beside Lily. Lily was shocked to see Scarlett picking her up. Scarlett went to sit in the front while Lily and the butler sat in the back. They didn't say much, and Lily sat in the back with a complicated heart. She only glanced at the rearview mirror and looked at the stranger Sergeant Baldwin without speaking. When she returned to her senses, the car had already driven into a large base. "This is... Scarlett. You..." Lily was a little uneasy seeing the two groups of soldiers with fierce weapons in front. Even if she didn't know where this was, she knew it wasn't a place to enter casually. Episode 677. Relationship with the Clark family.
"I have matters to attend to,"
Scarlett replied politely, her voice indifferent. While speaking, Sergeant Baldwin had already driven the car through the gate and parked aside. Before Scarlett got out of the car, someone saw her from outside and came to open the door for her. "Instructor Baldwin, Miss Rogers." Scarlett habitually pushed her black-rimmed glasses. Having stayed in the investigation department for a few days, she was already accustomed to such treatment. At the back of the car, the Grant family's butler also got out and helped Lily open the door. Once they got out of the car, they could see the Noble campus not far away. Before the two had time to react, there was a sudden wave of agitation in front of them. 2 rows of armed men walked over, headed by 3 officers with obvious epaulets. They stopped and stood in 2 respective rows. Just when Lily and the butler were confused and in a daze, a black and red car stopped, not far away. There were 2 people in the back seat. The first to come out was an old man of medium height and old age. There wasn't a hint of senility, and he had his hands behind him rigorously. Lily might not recognize the rank of the 2 officers from their lapel, but she had seen this old man in the textbook before. The armed SWAT team stood in 2 rows with real guns in their hands. Lily and the butler didn't even dare to gasp. When Scarlett and Sergeant Baldwin saw him coming, they also walked over respectfully. "Mr. Thompson." "Mr. Baldwin, Miss Rogers." The old man saw them and smiled brightly, with no fierce anger on his face. Finally, he turned his attention to Scarlett. "Today, you'll have to study your share and improve the plan. Let's go inside first." He turned around and led them into the house. The 3 of them walked forward. Despite so many people standing there, no other sound could be heard except the sound of the wind and the slosh of the training slogans on the training grounds. Lily didn't even dare to move. Once the 3 of them entered, the surrounding people scattered into 2 rows and protected the outside. Just as Lily's mind was abuzz with questions, a young man in military green clothes came over. The 2 rows of officers saluted the young man. "Mr. Clark." Warren took off his hat. "I'm here to lead Miss Rogers' guests." He glanced at Lily and said politely, "Lily, please come with me. I'll come to you once Miss Rogers is free." "Thank you," Lily answered stiffly. Warren still had no epaulets on his shoulder, but along the way, everyone would greet him no matter what. Even if Lily and the butler didn't know what he did, they could guess that he wasn't a simple character. When Lily lowered her head, she glanced at the butler in confusion. Warren took her to his office first. "Warren, let me tell you, for this special training class, you must give us 50 places. Otherwise, I'll report it to Michael." In the office, the person in charge of the 1st District glanced at him, having waited a while. Before he finished his sentence, he saw Lily walking behind. This is Miss Rogers' guest, Lily Grant." Warren gave him a quick glance. Then, he turned around and addressed her. "This is the person in charge of our main base." Lily had yet to react. The person in charge's eyes lit up. Rosemary was now in charge of the Clark family, but everyone listened to Michael's words. And who was in charge of Michael? The person from the Miller family. As for who it was, there was gossip that Scarlett was the only woman who could get Bessy to compromise. If this was Scarlett's guest, then it was Bessy's guest as well. By entertaining her, Scarlett and Sergeant Baldwin would very easily establish the special training camp quota. Now, all the insiders knew that Scarlett had learned from Bessy before. They didn't dare to rob Bessy from the Physics Research Institute, nor from the Clark and Miller families. Of course, they couldn't do so either. So, why not snatch Scarlett?
Miss Grant, hello. I'm the chief instructor of the combat headquarters, Clay Parker.
The person in charge hurriedly straightened his back and greeted her. He poured a cup of tea for her and continued.
Miss Rogers will be back soon. By the way, Lily, has Miss Rogers told you about the quota? Okay, stop bothering her,
Warren said and shooed the person in charge away.
If you have the ability, talk to Miss Rogers and Instructor Baldwin.
Then he smiled at Lily.
Don't listen to him. He just wants you to talk to Miss Rogers for him. But the quota is only determined after screening, so it's not best to put Miss Rogers on the spot.
Huh? Lily couldn't process so much new information in such a short while. She could only nod, unable to return to her senses for a long time. When Scarlett returned from talking with Sergeant Baldwin, Warren and the person in charge looked at them, full of admiration. As for Lily, she was still a little dazed. Scarlett didn't look at Lily and just said to the person in charge, I'll come back tonight to finish processing the investigation department affairs.
I'll send you back. Instructor Baldwin can stay here.
Warren immediately volunteered. Warren drove his own car, which was from the Clark family. He sent Scarlett back to the investigation department before sending Lily home. Gerald had already returned. When Scarlett got out of the car, Lily slowly returned to her senses. Her heartbeat was incredibly fast, and she stared at Warren in the rearview mirror, not daring to speak. She finally returned home. Gerald and Jacob were already waiting outside, both thinking that Scarlett would send her back. Unexpectedly, it was Warren. Warren was now the head of the Clark family, the next hall master. Gerald quickly greeted him and then personally sent him off. After returning, he glanced at Lily.
Where have you been today? Why did the Clark family send you back?
Lily was stunned for a moment.
The Clark family?
Everyone in this circle definitely knew the four major families, and also knew that no matter where they were, those four major families were certainly not easy to provoke. The person who sent her back was from the Clark family? How did Scarlett have anything to do with them? Episode 678. Giant Crocodile is Unwilling to Move. Lily knew that the person's name was Warren Clark because she had heard others calling him, but only now did she connect him to the Clark family. If it had been a few days ago, she wouldn't have been bothered if someone told her that Scarlett knew one of the four major families. But after everything she had experienced, she felt like, although she was surprised about this information, it was still reasonable. It was just that she didn't understand how an orphan like Scarlett had managed it. She turned to look at Gerald and Jacob again. Jacob was surprised, but Gerald didn't seem shocked at all, and only thought it was a matter of course.
You...
Lily opened her mouth, wanting to ask Gerald about Scarlett. Unexpectedly, he asked her first.
Where did Scarlett take you just now? Why did Leader Clark send you back?
Lily didn't know where she had been taken to, but it had been a strict place, with a bloodthirsty aura on everyone she encountered. She hadn't dared look around much and hadn't said much either. She could only describe it a little to him. Gerald naturally knew more than them, and he immediately frowned.
Why did Scarlett go to the base in the 1st District?
He stood there thinking for a moment, then suddenly looked up.
Don't tell me that the 1st District is trying to snatch her from the investigation department. This can't be. We can't win over the investigation department. And there's the 1st District now.
Gerald directly rushed into the house. After all, Bessy had been registered as a detective in the investigation department, but she was also a member of the Research Institute, so the investigation department hadn't dared to let her do any tasks. Gerald was now worried about Scarlett. He rushed in, leaving Lily and Jacob standing outside. Lily stared at Jacob complicatedly. She had hidden Scarlett's affairs from Jacob previously because she didn't want them to communicate, and she hoped for him to choose Victoria. But after the previous incident and the Grant family's problem, Victoria had only offered comfort in the house and had become blatantly estranged after the arrest. And she never imagined that it would be Scarlett who would save them.
Mom, I'll go to the Smith family's house first.
Jacob pressed his temples and said tiredly. Lily was about to tell him about Scarlett, but she couldn't find a good opportunity. She could only stare at him as he left. At the gate, only Lily was left. She stood there thinking for a while, then pursed her lips, in a dilemma.
Ma'am, I think Jacob still likes Miss Rogers.
The butler trailed off. Lily understood what he meant, but she was also very entangled. She paused for a long time before saying,
After 2 days, I'll go to her for a friendly talk.
In the Bright family's house, everyone was eating, including the patriarch. Samuel, like his grandma, didn't really like the Bright family members, even though he was now the leader. The people on the table exchanged knowing glances, and it took a long time before an old man over half a century old asked,
Samuel, I heard that you were with a girl in the neighboring city. You even took her to the special training area.
Holding his fork, Samuel knew that his fox friends had leaked the news. He nodded.
Is there a problem?
No problem,
the patriarch said immediately. Even if they weren't satisfied with the woman's identity, they didn't dare to say it in front of him. They were still aware of who was in power in the Bright family.
I was just wondering, are you serious?
Samuel used to be so frivolous, but he still had a limit. This was the first time he had done this. Samuel took a quick bite of a dish and looked up at the patriarch, smiling evilly.
That's right. If she agrees, I can go to the courthouse tomorrow. I'll bring it back for you to see, okay?
Slam. His grandfather's fork fell. Samuel was crazy.
I'm finished.
Samuel wiped his mouth and politely excused himself before leaving under everyone's eyes. After he left, his grandfather stared at Samuel's parents, crying without tears.
Did Samuel fall under someone's spell? How could he be like this over a girl?
I don't know. Maybe he'll be fine in a while. Don't worry. He won't be able to bring her back for a short while. Samuel's mother smiled gently, then looked at Samuel's leaving back and wiped her mouth. He was just talking big. Did he have the ability to bring her back? 3 days later, Bessy and Michael went to Austria to hold a decentralization meeting. It was more complicated there, and they didn't bring Aiden along. Scarlett was entrusted by Bessy to take care of him.
Sorry to trouble you, Miss Rogers. Marvin will be with you.
Patrick handed Aiden to her and laughed.
The main reason is that Michael is afraid the little child will bully others. Miss Miller is busy and Rosemary is also having a headache because of the residents in Evanston. So they're not very free.
Speaking of this, Patrick glanced at Marvin. Marvin silently lowered his head. This was the first time Scarlett was taking care of Aiden, and she carefully held him. Okay, can I take him to the investigation department?
Yes.
Scarlett nodded. Have you resolved Rosemary's issues? Patrick shook his head and thought for a while.
Rosemary might look for you.
Everyone knew that Scarlett was now a candidate for 129's heir. Scarlett smiled. Okay. She had been waiting for the First District's notice these days and was relatively busy because of Gerald's fight with the First District. When she brought the child to the office, Easton and Madeline all came over. Especially Madeline, who refused to leave after seeing Aiden. She even ate her lunch over there. At 3 p.m., Marvin made a round in the investigation department and returned to tell Scarlett,
Rosemary is coming to find you.
When will she arrive? Scarlett knew that some permanent residents in Evanston gave her a headache. Marvin thought for a while.
About 2 or 3 minutes.
Scarlett nodded. Easton knocked on the door.
Someone downstairs wants to see you.
Who? Scarlett looked up. Easton said a surname. Realizing that it was Lily, Scarlett fell silent.
Should I stop her?
No need. Scarlett put down her pen thoughtfully. Let her in. It wasn't that Lily had never been to the investigation department, but she was still shocked to see the words hanging outside of Scarlett's office. When she entered and saw Madeline, she paused and was about to ask for some privacy. However, Scarlett spoke first, her voice soft and gentle as always. She looked up from the computer and said, Lily, please go ahead. Lily looked down remorsefully, her attitude rather sincere. But because of other people present, she found it a little difficult to talk. Before she could finish, Scarlett shook her head calmly. No need to apologize. You've done nothing wrong. I'm very grateful to Uncle Grant, so you don't need to thank me. It's my duty to save him, so it's all right. You can go back if there's nothing else. She made it very clear that she had saved Gerald, her attitude extremely discreet. Before Lily could say anything, Marvin came back in with Rosemary.
Rosemary is here.
Rosemary was wearing an expensive dress, stepping on high heels a few inches high. She held only a cell phone in her hands, and her aura was very strong. It made people afraid to look her straight in the eyes. Scarlett stood up with a slight headache. Rosemary, you came just in time. I was about to ask if Big Brother Giant Crocodile is really unwilling to move. Episode 679. Be Humane. Lily was taken out by Easton. Before leaving, Lily tried to see Scarlett again, but was taken away without seeing her. The current Scarlett was unfamiliar to her in all aspects. She couldn't understand her conversation with Rosemary at all. She didn't know the child in Scarlett's office either. She also didn't know how she had helped Gerald. At first, after confirming that Scarlett had broken up with Jacob, she had been undoubtedly excited. But now, she was really hesitant. When she reached the gates, she saw the army dog lying quietly by the door. This, a newcomer on the 18th floor didn't have much contact with Lily and was naturally very polite to her.
This is a dog adopted by team leader Rogers. It's very obedient, and everyone on the 18th floor adores it.
The main thing was that when most people heard it was a military dog, they harbored different feelings for it.
I see.
Lily was taken aback and walked out step by step.
What kind of person is team leader Rogers? Who went to find her just now?
The staff nearly also went downstairs and helped her press the elevator. When the elevator doors closed, the staff saw that Lily's temperament and clothing weren't like ordinary people and whispered to her.
Actually, most people in the investigation department know about this matter. In fact, team leader Rogers isn't an ordinary person. The previous deputy investigator Hale was sent into the First District by her, and if it hadn't been for her, Investigator Grant might have really met his end. However, she was suspended from observation for a few days because of her involvement. Speaking of it, if she hadn't been involved, she would have become the acting deputy now.
Lily couldn't listen to the remaining words anymore. When the elevator door opened, she walked out in a daze. When she returned to her senses, she had already left the investigation department. The phone in her pocket rang. Picking it up, she was stunned to see Victoria's call. Even though she was under the scorching sun, she inexplicably felt an icy wave in her heart. She turned off the phone. Inside the investigation department, Rosemary sat in front of Aiden, still suffering from a headache. "Is she all right?" Madeline glanced at her and whispered to Scarlett. Madeline didn't know Rosemary. After all, Rosemary was mostly behind the scenes. Scarlett shook her head. "I don't know." She put down her computer and asked, "Rosemary, are you okay?" Rosemary pressed her temples. Madeline smiled and handed a strawberry to Aiden, then said to Rosemary, "Does that man have a crush on you? Is that why he's doing illegal things next door to you? Is it to get your attention? Actually, this isn't such a big deal. You can just call the police or talk to the security officer." After sending off Lily, Easton returned and also volunteered. "Let me help you. What illegal thing did he do?" "I already told the security officer. It's useless." These were Scarlett's friends, so Rosemary glanced quietly at them. Easton and Madeline were stunned. "Why is it useless? He didn't care?" Scarlett couldn't continue to listen and coughed. "Rosemary, giant crocodile. Is he studying a bomb?" Having been to the border once, she had guessed what giant crocodile was doing. Rosemary fell silent. Her heart was dejected. Madeline and Easton couldn't say anything. Was she serious? Scarlett couldn't help it anymore and closed her computer. It was no wonder Rosemary had come to find her. If Bessy and Clarissa didn't settle this, it might be fatal. "What about Mr. Ken?" Rosemary touched Aiden's head, feeling even weaker. "He lives next door to Giant Crocodile and talks business with him." Rosemary had rushed over for nothing, so she could only go back. After she left, Madeline and Easton were still staring motionlessly at Scarlett. Scarlett stood up and took Aiden for a drink of water outside. "Oh, team leader." Easton cleared his throat. "Giant Crocodile and Kenneth are his parents' friends." Scarlett glanced at Aiden and shook her head. "I'm not close with them." After she left, Easton and Madeline exchanged glances. Easton thought of something and turned on his phone. Madeline muttered to herself, "I finally understand why Scarlett's friends threw the child to her. What kind of people are beside them? Terrorists?" Easton found something on his phone and paused. They might really be terrorists. He hadn't managed to find out about Kenneth, but he could show Madeline news about Giant Crocodile. "I think she's talking about this giant crocodile." In the evening, Marvin sent Scarlett back. She returned to Luke's place. When she brought Aiden down, she saw a figure standing at the door, slender and tall, his shadow pulled longer by the street lamp. He was looking down at his phone and looked up when he heard her. "You're back." Samuel waved at her. "Patrick asked me to send a bottle and formula over." Speaking of this, he glanced at Marvin. "Aren't you looking for Uncle Smith?" Marvin was stunned. "No, you are, I remember." Samuel calmly stuffed Marvin back into the driver's seat. Marvin stared at Samuel's back and then called Uncle Smith. "I remember that you weren't looking for me. After all, we're both in seclusion. But Samuel said you were looking for me?" Mary's father nodded and agreed. "Go and ask him if he remembered wrongly." Mary's mother couldn't bear it anymore and snatched the phone over. "Marvin, it's me who is looking for you. Come over." Scarlett was looking for dog food. Samuel was holding a baby bottle and was looking for a thermometer. "It'll be good if Giant Crocodile is here. I can't feel the temperature. Scarlett, where's the thermometer?" Aiden put down the album in his hand and looked up at Samuel. Samuel was taken aback. "Your mom can look at me like that, but you can't. I can't win your mother, but I can't win you either." Scarlett poured the dog food and petted the dog's head. The dog was very quiet and would look at a place in a daze most of the time. Samuel said it was too old and couldn't run anymore. Scarlett stared at the dog for a long time, then looked back at Samuel, who was muttering to Aiden. She smiled to herself. It was rarely so lively here. In the hall, Samuel watched Scarlett squatting on the ground, her back looking very lonely. He didn't know how many years she had been in this state. If he had known such a day would come, he would have moved to Chicago in junior high school. He had always had an outstanding background since young, and because he followed Michael, he was fearless in Evanston. However, this was the only thing he was cautious about, and he was afraid of taking the wrong step.
Hey, here's some milk.
After finally handling the milk, Samuel handed it to Aiden and let him drink it himself. Aiden looked down and away from him.
Hey,
Samuel stared at him and raised his right hand.
Do you believe I'll throw you away?
Samuel had complained about Scarlett's biased attitude towards Aiden for a long time. Aiden finally raised his head and started pouting with a blank face. Seeing that he was about to cry, Samuel quickly changed his expression to a gentle smiling face. He handed the milk bottle to him, but his words were said through gritted teeth.
Little devil, please drink the milk.
If Aiden cried, Scarlett would probably chase him out. No, she certainly would. After finally feeding him milk and seeing how busy Scarlett was in the kitchen, Samuel clicked on Michael's number and asked him how to cook. He had once been chased out. 3 minutes later, Michael finally replied charitably, as if he was done with his business. Samuel hurriedly clicked on the reply.
Cook while standing.
Samuel was speechless. He was inhumane. Scratching his head, he was about to turn off his phone when a call came from the Bright family's patriarch.
What is it?
Samuel leaned back.
About the 1st District's new training base. I heard that the Clark family was in charge.
The patriarch said hesitantly.
You're also in charge, right? Can these candidates include our Bright family's disciples?
Samuel remembered that it was Scarlett and Sergeant Baldwin who were in charge. However, because of the recent conflict between the 1st District and the investigation department, he wasn't very bothered and simply said,
I don't know.
Samuel's grandfather was still quite afraid of Samuel and paused for a moment before sighing in relief.
The Cooper family seems to have participated in this matter, and their family has the right to vote.
Episode 680. Samuel's on his way. Samuel didn't really want to deal with these people, so he simply said,
Whatever you want.
He directly hung up. Although he knew that Scarlett and Sergeant Baldwin were in charge of the matter, he didn't feel the need to mention it to the Bright family. He turned around, glanced at Aiden, and continued nagging. Before he said much, the door opened. Who was it at this timing? Shocked, Samuel turned around and saw Luke entering. Although this was his house, he rarely came back and mainly used his laboratory as his home every day. He was basically an experimental madman. He came back today because he knew Aiden was here. Luke was wearing a white shirt and black trousers. His slender fingers were still on the door when he saw Samuel, and his eyes immediately turned cold. Samuel was actually 2 years older than him, but he still felt inexplicably intimidated by him.
Hello.
Luke didn't speak and just nodded slightly at him. Brother, you're back? Scarlett peeked out of the kitchen. Wait, I'll cook another dish. Luke put down the documents and rolled up his sleeves on both sides before walking to the kitchen.
I'll do it. You can go out. Girls should go to the kitchen less.
He spoke slowly and took over the spatula in Scarlett's hand. Scarlett wanted to say that his hand was for experimenting. Those hands for dividing various precision instruments were just as precious as Bessy's, and they shouldn't be used in the kitchen. However, she couldn't hold him back. The Song family was like Scarlett's family, and his parents were rarely at home. Back then, Luke and Scarlett had taken care of themselves in high school. Listening to their conversation, especially Luke's answer, Samuel was dealt 100 million points of damage. He pressed his cell phone, sent Michael a pleading emoticon, and also begged him. When Michael still ignored him, he took out his trump card.
Without me, can you go to Charles Wheeler High School?
Michael replied slowly this time.
Wait for me.
Samuel was very obedient this time and said,
Good dad.
Then he asked again.
Luke is helping Scarlett to cook. Do you think he...
He was the exceptional talent of Northwestern University's Physics Research Institute. Other than Bessy, much less Samuel, even Jacob wasn't 1/10 of him. Far away in Austria, Michael looked at the message and replied,
He studied physics while doing law at the same time in order to help Scarlett with lesson fees. If he has feelings for her, 100 of you won't be enough to beat him.
Looking at this sentence, Samuel suddenly felt like it was irrefutable. He was Bessy's friend for sure. Other than Paul, everyone else was a devil. In the kitchen, Luke was cooking vegetables, shooing Scarlett away when she wanted to help.
Close the door,
Luke said lightly. Scarlett turned around and closed the door before silently turning to him. Brother. Luke nodded, added water, and then continued simmering the soup. He went to wash the tomatoes at the side. His fingers had long joints and were white and beautiful. Scarlett felt like it was a waste to wash the vegetables with these fingers. Just when she thought he didn't want to speak, he put the tomatoes on the chopping board and turned to her.
I think he's pretty good.
Scarlett looked up at him.
That guy, from the Grant family.
He lowered his voice and glanced at her.
You never brought him over.
Samuel was probably the first one. Scarlett remained silent. The next day, in the morning, at the Grant family's house, Lily was sitting downstairs waiting for Gerald to come down. The phone in her pocket rang, but she didn't have the heart to answer Victoria's call. She hung up directly and immediately stood up when Gerald came down.
I have something to tell you. Let's go to the study.
Gerald glanced at her and followed her to the study. The two went upstairs. Victoria went to the Grant family's house. Lily had always treated her as her prospective daughter-in-law, so the servant directly received her and asked her to wait downstairs for Lily. After the servant left, Victoria thought that Lily was avoiding her and couldn't help but look for her on the second floor. She heard the conversation between Lily and Gerald in the study.
You want me to invite Scarlett for dinner?
Gerald glanced at Lily seriously.
What on earth is going on with you?
Having concealed Scarlett and Jacob's relationship at the beginning, Lily could only say it in a faltering manner now. Gerald glanced at her. He also wanted to talk to Scarlett about Fulton and stop her from being too impulsive.
Okay, I happen to have something to tell her tonight.
Outside, Victoria went downstairs quietly. She wasn't surprised that Lily was ignoring her and just thoughtfully left the house. Half an hour later, at Fulton's headquarters, the person sitting in the chair said in a deep voice,
Are you sure that the power of the First District has shifted? Yes, Scarlett will be at the Grant family's house tonight,
the person said solemnly. The person on the chair sneered.
Very good.
When Gerald arrived at the investigation department, he told Scarlett about this matter.
You've ruined Fulton's plans twice in a row. I'm very worried about you.
Although Scarlett didn't want any contact with Lily, Gerald's worries weren't unfounded. She knew this was one of the reasons why Bessy put Aiden with her. However, she didn't bring Aiden along to the Grant family's house and brought Marvin instead.
I'll follow you.
Marvin glanced at her. Scarlett shook her head. No need. She asked Marvin to stop near the house and then left. Marvin drove the car back to the Clark family's house. Samuel kept his phone and glanced behind Marvin.
Where is she? She's at the Grant family's home.
Marvin picked up Aiden. Samuel narrowed his eyes and suddenly paused fiercely. He directly turned around and left.
Samuel?
Without looking back, Samuel raised his hand and remotely opened the car door. Marvin only heard him say,
Help me contact Clarissa. Thank you.